Good evening, everybody. I'd like to call this meeting to order. It's Mayor Clark can't be here tonight. She had to travel for other business, so it's Tuesday, May the 20th, and we'll start the meeting off with a land acknowledgement. So the City of Medicine Hat acknowledges that we live and work on treaty territory. The city pays respect to all Indigenous peoples and honors their past, present, and future. We recognize and respect their cultural heritages and relationships to the land. And we'll now follow with just a moment of reflection or prayer. Thank you. So carrying on with the meeting, it's nice to see so many people here, I think. I guess time will tell. But it is good to have interested folks in the audience, so thank you. So we'll start with the adoption of the agenda. So do I need a motion to adopt or any additions to the agenda? Okay, having heard none, the agenda will...
So, I'm sorry, I was supposed to say something. There was a change to the agenda. Sorry, are we in the previous council meetings or you went straight to the agenda? I think.
Yeah, thank you. We needed to adopt the previous council meeting minutes for May the 5th, 2025. Do I have any changes, amendments to those motions? So just put them in record as they stand. Thank you very much for that. Adoption of the agenda. Councillor Robbins.
Yes, with respect to item 9.1 legal fee reimbursement, Mayor Clark, the last time, this was her notice of motion, last time we were before council discussing it, she had wanted it adjourned so she could provide council with additional information. She has done so. We asked her for one item of clarification, and she was able to provide that to us earlier this evening. And so I'm asking that this, so we can review what she sent us, that this be, my motion is that this be moved to the next regular council meeting. And Mayor Clark was aware of that before she left and was hopeful that somebody would do that. Of course, she can't make a motion, and so that's why she's provided us the information. Now we're going to consider it.
I can second that.
Okay, any discussion? All in favor, just vote. Thank you. Oh, I'm not at the right. Sorry. I'll have to remember to scooch over to my station to vote, so sorry about that. Okay, excellent, thank you. Okay, so we'll move on to councillor announcements. Are there any councillor announcements? Councillor Dumanowski and then Councillor Sharps.
Yeah, through the chair. So normally I'm certainly one of those people that likes to keep my personal life outside of the public domain. But with council's indulgence, I'd like to take a brief moment to acknowledge a personal milestone tonight. Today, to the actual day, marks 30 years of marriage to my wife, Pam, and me. I'm deeply thankful for her love, her patience, and support, particularly as I, indeed all of us, continue to juggle the demands of public service. I'm sure she would rather I be at home with her this evening. Nonetheless, here I am. As Pam often reminds me, serving on council might be my calling, but being present at home is my duty. I'm so fortunate that she stuck with me through it all. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Sharps.
Thank you, and congratulations, Councillor Dumanowski. So I have just a quick little update on unmanned aerial vehicles. I ran into Jace Cowan, who is the head of our tourism, last week, and we had a little conversation, and I actually had no idea about this. So I said, well, shoot me off a blurb because I think council would like to hear it, as would our public. So Medicine Hat is proud to have hosted the 2025 Aerial Evolution Association of Canada Student Competition. Following a successful RFP bid led by Community Futures Entrecourt, and Apex, the planning team hosted more than 170 Canadian university students from 15 universities across Canada. The students, sponsors, and hosts came from across Canada, spending several days right here with us in Medicine Hat. And what they found was big life in a small city. The national event was hosted for the first time in Western Canada, and it is a remarkable testament to the vision and planning within the strong unmanned aerial vehicle industry here in Southeast Alberta that we were the host for the community. Yours in tourism, Jace Cowan.
Thank you. So we'll move on to, I'm sorry. Oh, Councillor Robbins.
Yeah, I want to say that we thank you for that, Councillor Sharps. We had a presentation from Jace Anderson at the Public Services Committee meeting, and he was very enthusiastic, and I think City Manager Mitchell had attended the event as well, as did Mayor Clark. No, not at all. I was just wanting to clarify it was Jace Anderson, not Cowan.
Oh, I didn't say
You did.
Okay, well,
But
that
it
would
was
be a
Jace
really
Anderson,
good jump, but no,
tourism
it's,
guy,
yeah,
Jace, yeah.
Not the
Wrong
Crown
Jace.
prosecutor?
Wrong
Jace
Jace.
Anderson's always enthusiastic, so
Yeah.
thanks for bringing
Sorry
that
about that,
forward.
thank you.
So we'll move on to number 8, which is the consent agenda. Is there anybody that wants anything pulled from our consent agenda? Nobody? Okay, we'll move on then to unfinished business. We know we've got 9.1.
I'll move that council
Sorry, thank
adopts
you.
the consent agenda items as presented.
I'll second.
Okay, any discussion? We'll vote. I'll get this right. Give me time. Okay, that was straightforward. So legal fee disbursements, that's done. So we'll move on to 9.2, which is City of Medicine Hat Transportation Master Plan, Active Transportation, Transportation Safety Strategy. It's on page 293 to 526 of our agenda. And I turn this over to City Manager for opening remarks.
Thank you. Through the chair and with indulgence, I would ask Managing Director Bohan to give some opening remarks. This has been ongoing for quite some time, and we appreciate the work that's been done on this file. Go ahead, Pat.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to introduce the adoption of the Transportation Master Plan, the Transportation Safety Strategy, and the Active Transportation Strategy for your consideration. Presentation was given to a special meeting, or not special meeting council, a council committee of the whole, and this follows that presentation. Director Nowakowski is on hand with Manager Parikh and Engineer Ashton to address any questions. This 2-year plus process of community engagement resulted in 3 documents for your consideration. The process included anonymous online public survey engagement, as well as numerous public presentations and municipal mingles. In total, in the survey, 752 results were received and included various pieces of demographic information, age, number of vehicles, annual income, et cetera. Here are a few highlights. The Transportation Master Plan has 15 suggested action items. The Transportation Safety Plan and Active Transportation Strategy each have 20. The community survey ranked each of the proposed action items, and the numbers are quite interesting. The Active Transportation Survey alone showed that the item known as improving active transportation at intersections, 82% of respondents responded very or somewhat important. Building missing multi-use trails, 93% felt it was a very or somewhat important item. Building missing sidewalks, 86%. And improving universality for disabled folks, 85% very and somewhat important. So with that, I'll hand it over if you have any questions or interest to Director Nowakowski to help answer.
Well, perhaps we'll put a motion on the floor and then we could do questions from there. So there's a motion that if someone's prepared to make it.
I move that council adopts the strategic direction as outlined in the following reports: Transportation Master Plan,
active transportation strategy, transportation safety strategy.
I'll second that.
And seconded by Councillor Van Dyke. Okay, so now we'll open up the floor to any questions. I don't think there was going to be a presentation. No, we've had that already, so thank you. Councillor Knodel.
Thank you, and through the chair to Managing Director Bohan. So I think what we've observed in the last couple of days is a bit of a concerning number of residents that have trepidation or hesitation around these changes. Now, on the flip side to that, I have heard of people, and I know Councillor Robbins made the comment when we saw this presentation that there are a great deal of people that are enjoying the changes that they're seeing on Division Avenue, many of which are people that are walking and biking and using transportation in the way that these changes are intended to be used. So I'm just wondering if there's any way that, and I'll be clear that I'm in favor of changes for active transportation, the changes that have been posed here, but I'm not deaf to the ears of the community, or I'm not deaf ears to the community. So I'm just wondering, how do we move forward while also honoring the concerns of our residents? And how do we roll this out in a way that is slow and thoughtful so we can be strategic about these changes and still make minor adjustments if necessary?
Mr. Chairman, I'm going to hand that over to Director Nowakowski to tackle.
Thank you, through the chair. The Transportation Master Plan is the overarching high-level document that outlines our transportation network. It does not go down to the level of a road cross-section, such as Division Avenue or the recently released concept for 3rd Street North. Those are separate outside of the Transportation Master Plan. The Master Plan is the overarching document that outlines the network design, excuse me, where the arterials are going to go, where the collectors are going to go.
Thank you. I think through the chair, to have the ability to separate that out just as a peace of mind is helpful. It's a stage gate approach, which I think hearing that from you, and then hopefully the community also having the opportunity to hear that, is often when change happens, if it happens quickly, it's a lot for people to process. So I'm hopeful that knowing that this is a plan with incremental change throughout, that often does come forward to council before big changes are made, or we'll see that in the budget, and council will have the opportunity to discuss and determine what they are in favor of and be the voice of the community. I think that not only gives me peace of mind, but I hope that it's a good thing to hear for the community as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Van Dyke.
Yes, thank you, through the chair. I'm wondering if maybe you could expand a little bit, building off of what Councillor Knodel said, about the process that you go through in consultation with the very specific areas that you're planning to do projects in. So those would have some design work done and consultation before it ever came to council with a budget attached to it. But I know that it was quite a lengthy process, and in particular, I know that it has been spoken around the Horseshoe, how it was done in more commercial corridors of South Railway. And I'm wondering if maybe you could expand on how that process went.
Yes, through the chair. Typically, when we identify a corridor for, corridor for reconstruction, if the infrastructure is failing, it's a good opportunity for us to look at what else can we do along that corridor. So South Railway is a good example where we had a road that was failing. We knew that we wanted to extend the active transportation network from Scholten Hill down towards downtown area. So we put together a conceptual plan. We also knew that that stretch of road had numerous challenges. a lot of businesses, a lot of access points that were onto that road. There was parking issues. So we put together a concept plan. We sat down with the businesses individually. We gathered their feedback. We went back, we redesigned things, we changed things, took it back to the business owners, sat down with them again individually, and reached consensus on a design. Similarly, we've done things with like Division Avenue, where we presented a concept, we took it to the public. There were a couple of municipal mingles that we did. There was one-on-one consultation with the businesses along Division. We also consulted with the school boards. We did an internal circulation through Technical Coordinating Committee. So we gathered all that information and we made changes to the design again.
Councillor Dumanowski.
Through the chair, I have comments. Is this question time, or can I make a comment as well? Okay. I don't have all the answers, but certainly they've been addressed. We had our open meeting last week, and so a lot of that deeper dive occurred. Just to add on or build on what's already been said, recognizing that this is a master plan, it's kind of the scaffold. That's my analogy. It identifies kind of the mechanisms upon which a deeper, more granular review will occur at future point. I understand, as Councillor Canola said, there are specific interests in some of the things that are outlined in here. This is not a rubber stamp. This is not meant to suggest that there is, that level of specificity already completed. Those, as has been outlined with the South Railway, and I was going to remark on that, having been on council and I was chairing development and infrastructure, as it was called at the time, and we had, it seemed like close to 2 years to have that process. And when you're around this table, sometimes on the public facing side, it seems to take forever for City Hall to get things going, but it was very intentional, and it was meant to ensure that both the business community, directly and indirectly impacted by the changes, and the public at large, those who traverse that roadway system or just had general interest, had the ability to give their feedback. Hence the public engagement that has been undertaken since October, from Shape Your City to citywide open houses, multiple city open houses. One that was just recently done at Big Marble, and I was able to go there as well. Lots of interest from the public. I know it's only important sometimes to a person when a very specific roadway or a component of the master transportation plan is being looked into, but I want to assure the public that those processes or those opportunities will occur. And so specific to Kingsway, that's the one I hear about the most right now. I think we all do, and I don't make light of it. That will be forthcoming. My parting comment would be with the South Railway process and the likes of others, Kingsway, for example, what was non-negotiable was that there needed to be enhancements made. There needed to be reconstruction. Deep services were going to be changed. And so the conversation was around not necessarily the what, but the how. And I think the public needs to understand that they will have the opportunity to contribute to that how, whether it's directly, if they haven't already, or through their council. But I'm encouraged by what we have here today. It adheres to best practice, it adheres to safety codes, and it ensures a continuous process of improvement on our roadway systems as we move forward, which, if neglected, certainly would be heard loud and clear in the other sense from the public. So I just want to thank staff for their engagement. Very important that you've done that engagement, and for your commitment to future engagement as well.
Councillor Hyder.
Thank you, and through the chair, thanks, Andy. like Councillor Canodal spoke about, we have received an immense amount of emails and calls regarding the transportation master plan, and on both sides of the coin. And I do applaud staff for all their hard work in developing this. It's been a long time, and all the hours that go into it, so I appreciate that. But as I sit here, I think of the members of the community that elected me to do a job, and I need to do this job, and they need to be heard. I've lived here my whole life, and there are things that I question within the plan. So at this time, I was hoping to make a motion, Councillor McGrogan.
So there's a motion on the table.
Oh.
So, no, I'm just wondering, so you want to make an amendment to the motion, or what is it that you're hoping?
I was hoping that we could talk about having a non-statutory hearing, public hearing. So should I wait on that, or?
So just speaking with the city clerk, apparently we deal with this motion.
Okay.
Now, but I guess my concern is if we approve this motion, what value is this in a non-statutory public hearing if council so desires to move forward with that? I guess that'd be a question for the city clerk.
So you can do, last.
You got to use your mic.
So last in is first out. So if you'd like to make that motion, and then it would have, so last in, first out.
Okay, that makes sense to me. Thank you. So do we put the motion forward on the floor now? Okay, go ahead, make the motion.
Thank you, and thank you for the clarity. Sorry, folks, I'm still new here. Anyway, I'd like to move that we have a non-statutory public hearing on the subject matter of the Transportation Master Plan, including active transportation strategy, transported safety strategy, on this matter.
Okay, thank you. Did we get that?
Yep.
I'll second.
Okay, seconded by
Thanks, Charlotte.
Councillor Sharps. Now, do we, I think, continue on with our comments on the first motion? So Councillor Sharps, you're up.
Second motion, right?
Okay, we're going to deal with the second motion. So comments, Councillor Sharps, you're still up.
Good. Good to hear. Okay, so thank you very much. And I actually have the exact same comments, whether it's the first motion or second motion. Shocking, I know. So I made a motion at the last meeting to have a non-statutory public hearing, and because I was hearing this, and I'm really glad that council is taking a second look and open to the conversation. We've had an immense amount of emails and contact coming forward and just asking, and not even we're so opposed or we're so for, but we'd like a say. We'd like to be heard more. We have concerns. So, and I think when I listened to this, and I will be very honest, one of the concerns I had was when we say, well, the council and community will have a chance to speak to this, I look at Division Avenue, and that was never in front of this council, but all of a sudden it was there. So I don't remember ever being able to have that fulsome conversation. And when I don't agree with something, I don't want to be taken that I don't appreciate staff's work. I get the feeling that sometimes when we don't agree around this horseshoe, that's a direct, I don't appreciate your work or I disagree with you. That has never been it. My job here is to represent the public and the public that I meet with, and that will always be the forefront of what we do. I don't always agree though, okay? So I appreciate that, but lots of times I'm sure you want to kill me too, so I get that. The reason I'm saying that is because sometimes I think that when we're debating, the debate is meant to be around council, and I think sometimes administration gets drug into that, and that's never the intention. I know how hard everybody works, but I also know how frustrated I can be as a citizen, and I am one that takes Division Avenue, or used to. And I think I told Managing Director Bohan this story the very first day it opened, and it's, you know, woe is me for sure, but the very first day Division opened, I was, a few years ago, I might have had a midlife crisis and bought a sports car, and I was driving it up Division, and truck was turning right off of onto Division and scraped the entire side of it. And he just couldn't manage the turn. He was devastated, he was gutted, and it was so not intentional. He wasn't going fast. So it just made me realize that he lived there, he said he never knew anything about it, no one talked to him. I'm not saying that's accurate, but what people hear and how people feel engaged from 5 years ago, 4 years ago, 2 years ago, 6 months ago is not the same way. So I think that we just have to pivot, and when they tell us they're not being heard, we don't have to argue with them, we just have to hear them. That's all in my mind, that's all we're doing is trying to hear them. So I appreciate Councillor Hyder bringing this forward. I will say in the last 24 hours, I've also had comments that they really like division and would like to see that everywhere. So we do have to hear the community, but part of a non-statutory public hearing is that they get to hear each other too. And so we get to educate each other on why we like something or why we don't like something, and just a better understanding of how each other thinks. And I don't think that can ever cause harm if we can just listen and talk to each other a little bit more. So I appreciate Councillor Hyder bringing this forward. I appreciate our community. When you saw something that you didn't like or you did like, you spoke up, you emailed us a lot, which is awesome. That's what you should be doing. So thank you.
It was pointed out to me by the city clerk that we need to put direction of a date for this statutory public hearing. So, city manager, I would ask that you give me a recommended time frame for that.
Thank you. Through the chair, given that Q2 is almost finished, I'm looking over at Managing Director Bohan, knowing that we have a full slate. What are your thoughts, Managing Director Bohan?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, I mean, we're prepared for a non-statutory public hearing, at the will of council. So with whatever the time permits with council's agenda, that would work for us.
So if we were to say the end of June, would that be a reasonable time? I can't make it. Mid-July. Go ahead, City Manager.
Thank you. Through the chair, just a suggestion given everybody. I do appreciate Managing Director Bohan for accommodating, but we've had to add 4 extra council meetings. So if you could leave it with us, we will attempt to get it done by Q2, but if not, can we also creep into Q3? Just given time constraints and everybody's schedule.
Yeah, that sounds reasonable. Thank you very much for that. Councillor Van Dyke.
Yes, thank you through the chair. So I just wanted to speak to this secondary motion, I guess. I don't know what it's called, but oh, good. I was right. Thanks. Yeah, so we had this information, this report presented to us in a council committee of the whole. And at that time, Councillor Sharps did make a motion to have this brought to a non-statutory public hearing. And at that time, I voted against it. And my reasoning is the same today as it was then, and I will not be supporting this motion, and for several reasons. One, this is not a plan specific to any project. As Councillor Dumanowski has stated, this is an overarching philosophy and principles around transportation in the city. There will be when specific projects come forward, they will come with budget attachments and public consultation specific to those projects, which I think is the appropriate time to have input from the public on those things. We have had considerable input already on this plan. So if you go to the Shape Your City website, you can see the survey results, which include the numbers of people who responded as well as their comments. So any comments that were made are included in that report, so you can see what people had to say about it. And so I believe that we have met the threshold for public consultation, including for statistical accuracy of the survey respondents, which I believe in this community is around 400 people, and we have surpassed that. So I'm not sure that a public hearing at this point would alter anything in the plan specifically, considering this is not a project-based plan. And so I will not be supporting the motion. Thank you.
Councillor Robbins.
Yeah, I just had a question for Director Nowakowski. I'm just looking at the transportation master plan. I just want to make sure I understand the table. Sorry I didn't ask this in our earlier meeting when we went through the plan. which was an open meeting. Not many people showed up, but we did go through all of it, and there was lots of questions asked and answered, and I missed this one, so I apologize to you. So I'm on page 80 of the master plan, if you've got it. If you don't have it, it's no big deal. I have a table 9.4, road network upgrades cost estimates on page 80, or it's 378 of our package, but you probably don't have the whole package there. So you've got the table 9.4 road network. And again, apologize, I didn't ask this before. Is this a list of prioritized items, or is it just a list based on region of the city or sector of the city? Like, this isn't a to-do list 1 through whatever, you're gonna start at the top and work your way down. It's gonna be as need.
Well, yeah, through the chair, there is a time frame when these should be done.
Right.
But we also look at condition of the road. So if one of these particular roads starts to fail, it may get bumped up in that priority listing.
So if I look at the priority listing, I've got 2 in the next 5 years, and then 2 that are sort of 5 to 10 years, and everything else is long-term master plan, more than 10 years out. Is that how I would read that? Okay, thank you. That really helps me.
Councillor Hyder.
Thank you, Councillor McGrogan, and through the chair. I think I feel that it is important for us to actually, it has nothing to do with not liking the plan, or I just feel we need to have a place where people that reside in this community, a safe place where they can come and voice their concerns about, and maybe learn from each other, like Councillor Sharp said, on different perspectives of things. I too have received emails that love the Division Avenue, but I just was hoping that we could find a place as a community to have these conversations and make sure that the opinions of the citizens that live here, their opinions matter and that their opinions are heard.
Councillor Knodel.
Thank you, and through the chair. So my curiosity is, I'm curious about the non-statutory public hearing and the relationship to a document that is this vast, and how we gather feedback, and hopefully the idea would be to address the feedback that we're given. Would the feedback be on the entire philosophy of the document? That's my curiosity. And then would the whole philosophy change based on the feedback? I just want to know about what would the public be giving feedback specifically on?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It would really depend, I think, on the will of council, and it comes down to this. Ultimately, there's 3 documents that are coalesced into the overall master plan. So you're asking a very good question. It would be very difficult to sort of coalesce information from that, and it would basically, once that information is sort of the commentary is made by the public, then council could direct administration to go back and further review the plan. It would be up to council to give the administration direction as to the next steps.
Councillor Sharps.
Thank you very much. Through the chair. I just wanted to kind of talk a little bit about what would community give us feedback on, and I think it's varied. There's 3 plans here, and there's some pretty passionate people on all 3. So to me, we're opening up the doors. It's a bit of a Pandora's box, but they do need to be heard. And I agree with Councillor Van Dyke that, we've done a lot to hear from the public, but, when I go on to Shape Your City, and I just want to explain why I'm supporting this, is when you go into Shape Your City, the number 1, I believe, a statement by citizens was to widen our roads and keep flow of traffic non-congested, and that's exactly the opposite of what's occurred on Division. And it is for me, maybe it's me.
Point of order. Thank you. Yeah, point of order, just no dialogue.
Yeah, I
in the
appreciate the
chamber. Thank
enthusiasm of
you.
the crowd. I'm not afraid to use this, though I don't like to. Could please leave your comments and your applause. We're just trying to get through a conversation down here, and but appreciate it. Thank you.
So the thing I would say is, and I would like to give council an example of one of the reasons for this. Managing Director Bohan had made a comment about the community is, and I believe that is our intention, but, so I'm going to give you an example, and I just don't want you to take the wrong way. The roundabouts. I go to myself, I lived in England, so I love roundabouts, but I like them when they're super efficient and I don't have to be at a stop sign. But that's me, right? So I love roundabouts. I think they're efficient, not loving ours, I have to admit, but a part of me wants to say, okay, so what did they achieve? What were we trying to achieve? And then I have to go, would a stop sign from a councillor sitting down with a community member for coffee, I have to say to myself, would a stop sign have given us the same impact? Would a speed bump would have given us the same impact? Or was this a trial to see if speed roundabouts were a good thing to do in Medicine? So I guess to answer Councillor Van Dyke's question is I never ever saw that opportunity. So I think that's where we're getting some of this feedback from is, wait a minute, I didn't get a chance to say that. So I'd really like to say that and talk about it. And I want to be clear, like there's a lot of things in here. It's just not road construction. We, as you all know, we're dealing with Heron Crossing as well. That is a pathway. That's a multi-use pathway. It's a safety issue. So there's lots of people that want to speak to various parts of this active transportation and different paths. And I think they just need to be heard, and I think that we'll be able to listen to it and give good direction. I trust that. I do trust that we have that ability to do that. I really do want to hear from the public, and I think we can do that respectfully with each other, where we're showing it right here. We don't all agree, but we can do that respectfully, and we can have them do the exact same thing. So I just wanted to make sure that I was clear on why, okay?
Okay, thank you for that. I do have a question, Mr. Nowankowski. I'm curious about what we've learned from Division Avenue South, and as a result of that learning, if any, how does that adjust our thinking moving forward? Or does it?
Through the chair, excellent question. We've learned a lot. We're going to improve our communications. I don't know, what else did we learn, Sandeep?
Through the chair, to Councillor McGrogan, we, of course, like it's a process that we have adopted, and as we started from South Railway we learned, and then from Division we learned, but in Division specifically, maybe we look at, some of the turning movements, there are different concepts of, whether it's a design vehicle or a control vehicle. So we are breaking that up and sort of, maybe present that during an open house, show them that what is possible and how turns will happen and what kind of vehicle will be able to comfortably make those turns. So more of presentation and showing public what we are trying to achieve by adding more details to some of the open houses that we have been going to.
Thanks for that. And that's what I was kind of hoping to hear. I think we all saw Division Avenue and its concept, and it looked great. But now, of course, we all heard it over and over about some of the difficulties, and it mostly has to do with the turn lanes, but whatever. But it's comforting to hear that we're going, hey, you know what, maybe there's some things we can do with the design in the future. And I think that's what the community also wants to hear, is that, okay, we don't always get it right the first time, but what are we doing to adjust moving forward? I think that's what the people want to hear. So I just want to say I support a public hearing as well, just so people can voice their concerns around this issue. It's very emotional. I probably heard more about Division Avenue and the rumors of Kingsway and now 3rd Street. And I actually spoke with Managing Director Bohan before the meeting, and he produced kind of the concept of 3rd Street. So it appears that they're going to eliminate parking along 3rd Street, but it doesn't seem to be the case. If you look closely at the design, it's on the Shape Your City site. It's sometimes difficult to see that. I don't see anything wrong with giving the public an opportunity to come forward and just ask the questions. I think we all leave here more informed. So I'm going to support the motion, and I guess if there's no other speakers, we'll take it to a vote. And the motion is council approves holding a non-statutory public hearing regarding the Transportation Master Plan, the Active Transportation Strategy, and the Transportation Safety Plan by the end of Q2 with a little bit of flexibility in relation to that timeline. So, City Manager, go ahead.
Thank you. Through the chair and to the chair, I would request that that gets changed, that we attempt Q2, but give us leeway, and I'd like it to actually state that in the motion. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that. So the motion now is attempting, okay, so now the change is Transportation Safety Plan, attempting by the end. I don't know if that's proper language.
May I?
Go ahead.
Can we change that? If that's the deal breaker, I guess to me it's no later than the end of Q3 2025. I guess to me this is going to affect administration more than anything because all the other plans are on hold until there's a.
Yeah, so I guess it's in everybody's best interest to have this done as soon as possible, and City Manager will look after that. So motion as it stands, can we have a vote, please? So it looks like it passes 5-2. So thank you. So now we deal with the first motion. We don't have to now? No. Okay, excellent. Thank you for your information and appreciate the work that's been put into this. Very much appreciated. Thank you. So we're now at business arising from closed session. It's approval of non-union salary grid. The sponsor is the City Manager, so I'll turn it over to the City Manager for comments, and then I think Councillor Dumanowski is going to put a motion forward.
Thank you, and through the chair, I will turn it over to Director Koken. This is to make sure that our salaries are in alignment. It is part of our 3-year people strategy and part of our compensation philosophy. Go ahead, Director.
Thank you. Good evening, Council. 2 weeks ago, we were here, as you recall, and we made the presentation for the non-union salary grids that haven't been updated since 2013. Those grids were supplied, and I know they were under review, so we are here to answer any questions that you'd like to bring forward.
Councillor Sharps.
I know Director Koken was expecting that, I'm sure. Damn HR people, eh? So here's my question to you. So when I look at a salary grid and people around the community go, well, salary grid, that means increases, that means budget amendments. Am I looking at a budget amendment with this salary grid?
Through the chair to Councillor Sharps, no, there is not going to be a budget amendment with the change in the salary grids. The grid itself is going to change, but the salary, where the salary will change for our non-union staff is it'll be based on merit, and that's already been approved in the budget. So in updating the salary grids, and I'll let Jonathan explain that a bit deeper, it's going to be more marketable, it's going to be more current, but it doesn't mean everybody's going to shift onto a brand new grid and see a big increase. That's not it at all. But I will let Jonathan get into a bit of the theoretical, if that helps as well.
Sure, and then I had 2 more questions.
Okay,
thanks.
Through the chair to Councillor Sharps. So what happens is with the new grids, the salaries won't change for the employees. It's just their position within the grid changes. So the grids have been updated, meaning that their comp ratio is going to change.
That makes complete sense to me, but again, sometimes when the public's watching, we just need to deep dive some of these issues. And then my last 2 questions with the compensation was, so that's that kind of ascertains 2025. Is there any intention to come forward in 2026 with a budget amendment on salary increases? I'll just ask you that a year in advance.
Sure. Through the chair to Councillor Sharps, no, there will not be, we will not bring that forward. What gets approved through the budget process is any increase for merit for non-union.
Okay, perfect. And then my last question was just on the technical. I noticed that engineering was separate. So when we look at occupations that are governed such as through a PEGA, how do we align with a PEGA?
Yeah, so Through the chair to Councillor Sharps, thanks for the question. We do look at OPEGA as a reference point, but for the surveys that we're using Mercer MBD, which is one of the largest surveys, and you can get a lot more data points than something like OPEGA. And then also using a municipal survey that directly relates to other municipalities in Alberta.
Can I just suggest that you spell that acronym out for the audience, please?
APEGGA, the Association of Professional Engineers, Geology, there's a bunch of PNGs in the room, they can tell me. Association is the last one, sorry.
City Manager.
Thank you. Through the chair, I just keep hearing noise, and I'm just trying really hard to concentrate, and I could just ask if everybody could, if they want to chat, if they could just go out in the hall, I'd really appreciate it. Thank you. It's really hard to concentrate down here.
Yeah, thank you. I didn't notice because I was chatting with the city clerk trying to make sure I was getting things right. So folks, if you could just keep your chatter down, we'd appreciate it. But I think I was the worst offender there. My apologies.
Sorry, just to finish off that question then. So when we're looking at these positions, and I'm specifically asking about the technical, we are not just, like, we are appealing to that tax, or to that group. So if I was a PNG, am I going to look at a job and say, no way, the city's 20% under? Or am I going to say, they're pretty comparable? Or they might be a little bit lower, but I get this here and I get to be at home and I work, different hours and there's a better, are we in that bracket or are we 20% out of market?
Through the chair to Councillor Sharps, different organizations will choose different where they want to pay. So as an organization, we're paying at that median. Some organizations might pay at a higher, like P75, and our employees may see that a salary is higher. However, we are using a survey that will give us data that will keep us competitive within the market.
So we are competitive.
Yes.
That's all that I care about. Okay, thanks.
So I think it's time to put two motions on the floor, and I'd turn that over to Councillor Dumanowski.
Yeah, through the chair, the first motion, I'm going to read right off. I'm going to read the one in front of us here. Council approves the changes to policy 8026 in terms of updated and current market non-union salary grids for corporate A and engineering IT B.
Second.
Seconder. Okay, any discussion? Okay, we'll vote. Okay, that's unanimous, so second motion, please.
All right. Thank you. Through Chair, Council, I move that Council approves the Energy C grid as discussed in closed session.
I'll second.
Any comments, questions? Okay, we'll vote. And that's unanimous. Thank you. So we'll move on to new business. This has only been 4 years now that we've been discussing this. It looks like we have the Medicine Exhibition Stampede capital funding request. The sponsor is Public Services. Thanks for attending again, all the folks from the Stampede board that are here. And I'm going to turn it over to City Manager for opening remarks.
Thank you very much, and I do find it ironic that it's under new business, but I just want to thank both the Stampede, the board, Ron, the executive director. We've had many, many meetings over the time. Managing Director Hutter and his team, Corporate Services, put in a lot of work. So without further ado, I will turn it over to Managing Director Hutter.
Thank you. Good evening. Appreciate the opportunity to present on this item tonight. And I'd also like to extend my appreciation to MHES's board and administration for attending tonight and for their involvement in this project. The recommended motion is that City Council approves a budget amendment of $250,000 to fund a preliminary concept design and project costing for a reduced North Grandstand option, which will be referred to in this report as Building Plan 3. I'll now provide a brief overview of the events and decisions that have brought us to where we are today. At the regular meeting of City Council on October 3rd, 2023, MHES provided a detailed version of an event center and grandstands and requested that the city consider funding 40% and additional support through an interest-free loan for 20% of the total project cost, with the province contributing the remaining 40%. On November 6th, 2023, City Council directed administration to take no further action on the request until additional supporting documentation was received from MHES. A year later, on November 4th, 2024, City Council received for information a report titled MHES Revitalization and Conference Center, which outlined the findings of research completed by Saracon Inc. And most recently, on February 3rd, 2025, City Council moved to postpone any decision related to MHES's request for capital funding until the province has made a decision on future funding for MHES following the province's sustainability assessment on regional ag societies. On April 24th, 2025, the province of Alberta issued a news release related to new funding for Alberta's 7 ag societies, regional ag societies. Based on recommendations from the sustainability assessment conducted by Deloitte, the province allocated just over $4 million in one-time support among the 7 regional ag societies, along with an additional $2.9 million in one-time support to assist business transformation projects, such as the development of strategic planning documents. Additionally, the province mandated the completion of a facility condition assessment, which is currently underway by MHES and is required to be completed by August 15th, 2025. Notably, MHES's annual operating grant of approximately $400,000 from the province will remain unchanged. Overall, the province's decisions stemming from the sustainability report, most importantly the continued annual operating funding, played a key role in the development of the cost-sharing plan known as Building Plan 3. Preliminary concept design and project costing of a reduced North Grandstand option, again otherwise known as Building Plan 3, would involve a project scope including, but not limited to, the demolition of the existing North Grandstand, construction of a new North Grandstand, which would include the following elements: accessible seating to exceed or meet current building codes, washrooms to meet or exceed code for public gathering spaces, storage and concession space to accommodate sales of consumables for events, stadium seating, appropriate roof structure over seating areas, design for possible expansion or installation of event and rentable spaces in future development. A review of current building code and renovation of the existing South Grandstand would include the following elements: addition of stadium seating, siding and aesthetics to match the new North Grandstand, waterproofing the facility envelope, and other code improvements to update the facility as required. The recommended approach would provide MHES with additional time to continue advocating for provincial and regional funding and also pursue private fundraising initiatives. Furthermore, if provincial funding is not immediately available, this approach would help position the project to be near shovel-ready should such funding become available in the future. Should the recommendation be adopted by Council, prior to proceeding with granting further funding, the following conditions would be recommended in an effort to source the remaining funds for the project. Number 1, that the province of Alberta guarantees 40% funding for the project, and that MHES engages in conversations for requests of support from regional municipal partners and or private donations to source 10% of total project costs. The proposal introduced by MHES included 2 distinct options: Building Plan 1 with an associated estimated total cost of around $38.9 million, and Building Plan 2 with an associated estimated total cost of $29.7 million. Building Plan 1 consists of a full rebuild of the North Grandstand, a deck addition, maintenance to the South Grandstand, and the construction of an atrium/multi-purpose room that would contain breakout rooms, a commercial kitchen, and a larger multi-purpose room that would tie into the existing Higdon Hall. Building Plan 2 focuses on the reconstruction of the North Grandstand and rehabilitation of the South Grandstand, with construction of meeting/breakout rooms, a commercial kitchen, and serving areas and storage and event space underneath the reconstructed North Grandstand. Administration analyzed the following building plan scenarios. Number 1, Building Plan 1 funded 50% by the city for approximately $19.5 million. Building Plan 2 funded 50% by the city for approximately $14.85 million, and Building Plan 3 at an estimated total project cost of approximately $20 million, funded 50% by a $10 million grant from the city. Estimates for Building Plans 1 and 2 are current to 2023 and are anticipated to be outdated at this time. A portion of the proposed consulting fees are allocated to updating cost reports in preparation for an assumed August 2026 start to construction activities. A significant portion of the city's reserves are earmarked, which is a fact that is often overlooked or misunderstood. Additionally, the interest earned on these reserves are a key component of the city's revenue, and any decline in revenue subsequently requires a tax rate increase. The table on page 3 of the briefing note estimates that allocating 50% funding for building plans 1, 2, or 3 would result in a projected permanent tax increase of 1.04%, 0.79%, or 0.53% respectively. In analyzing MHES's financials over the past 7 years, the following insights have been gleaned. Ticket sales have declined since 2022, and when adjusted for inflation, since 2019. Rental revenue has remained stable over the 7-year period. Grant revenue has experienced modest growth. Event production expenses have steadily increased. Wage expenses have remained steady, though they decrease when adjusted for inflation. Repairs and maintenance expenses have decreased both with and without inflationary adjustments, and net current assets have generally declined over the period. I'd like to direct Council's attention for 1 second to the second table on page 4 of the briefing note, or page 533 of the agenda package. To provide a broader understanding of the compounding effects of budget amendments, our team collaborated with the teams in Finance and Municipal Services Business Support to develop tables outlining both potential, upcoming budget amendments, and currently approved budget amendments. We will continue to use this tool in future budget amendment requests. Now, as with many recommendations, there are alternative options that Council may wish to consider. Several alternative options explored by administration include Alternative Option 1, which refers to Council granting MHES with the full request as related to Building Plan 1. In this scenario, support is provided to an organization with a nearly 140-year history in Medicine Hat, and according to the Saracon report, MHES generates an annual economic impact of $13.7 million to $17.3 million in Medicine Hat, and $15.4 to $20.7 million across the broader Canadian economy. And Building Plan 1 is expected to enhance that impact. And a recent report conducted on behalf of the regional ag societies indicated that these figures may be conservative. The cons associated with Alternative Option 1 include the result of the city granting the request is an estimated permanent annual average tax increase of approximately 1.04%. MHES's physical location likely does not fit the model for a modern and desirable convention space, and by this I mean modern convention spaces are typically located in areas with higher service density in terms of hotels and restaurants. Further, no market demand study has been conducted by MHES to provide objective evidence that there is a need for added convention space in Medicine Hat. And to this end, an internal study conducted in February of 2023 by administration determined that there was no demand for additional convention space in Medicine Hat. Furthermore, new convention space would be in direct competition with existing city facilities. And lastly, granting funding may result in similar requests from other organizations. In terms of Alternative Option 2, this would involve Council granting MHES with the full request related to Building Plan 2. In addition to the pros listed in Alternative Option 1, Alternative Option 2 is less impactful from a financial impact perspective, and reconstruction, rehabilitation of the grandstands represents a much more direct need. In addition to the cons listed in Alternative Option 1, improving the grandstands does not provide MHES with an improved ability to generate revenue. Alternative Option 3 relates to the concept of referring MHES's request to the new not-for-profit capital grant program. In doing so, would help to create consistency and equity in administering capital grant fund requests, which was the impetus for the creation of the grant program, and would further provide MHES with more time to advocate for provincial and regional funding support. In terms of cons for Alternative Option 3, referring MHES's request to the program would further delay a decision. And in addition, the program's maximum funding allocation of 33% falls well short of MHES's request. Alternative Option 4 is to consider deferring a decision until the completion of the ongoing provincially mandated facility condition assessment. In doing so, would provide the city with a stronger understanding of the condition of MHES's facilities, but would again delay a decision by approximately 4 months at the very least. Alternative Option number 5 considers deferring a decision until MHES has secured a formal funding commitment from the province of Alberta. This would ensure that no further administrative time is allocated to this item until a commitment is secured, but would still not address the immediate issues with the existing North Grandstand. And finally, alternative option number 6 would be to deny funding to MHES, which would result in the lowest financial impact, but would also not address the immediate issues related to the existing North Grandstand and would, of course, negatively impact MHES's sustainability. And if the recommended action is approved, the Fleet and Facilities team would engage with the current consultants through an existing standing offer agreement and manage the design work, with MHES representatives as stakeholders being engaged for design as primary occupant and operator. On approval, design would begin immediately, and administration would return in Q3 2025 to provide an overview and a request for a budget amendment for construction. And ultimately, I believe the recommended action attempts to strike a balance between addressing the immediate needs of MHES while maintaining broader financial sustainability. Thank you for your time and attention, and I welcome any questions council may have.
Thank you, Managing Director Hutter. Any questions, comments? Councillor Dumanowski.
Through the chair, Managing Director Hutter, I definitely will have some comments at the appropriate time. My question is around the $250,000 fund request for preliminary concept design, albeit for a reduced North Grandstand option. Notwithstanding the fact that council hasn't had a chance to debate, other than the budget amendment for the preliminary concept design cost, is a matter of my determining support or not for the motion before us, or that will be before us. If we, because council hasn't formalized a determined concept other than the motion suggests a design for a reduced North Grandstand, I would submit and suggest that that is not comprehensive enough to suggest that council is overwhelmingly in support of Building Plan 3 entirely. So my question is, if that $250,000 costing could, in fact, encompass optionality around a more concept design or costing, project costing for building plans 1, 2, and 3, or at the very least, one of the other options and 3. It seems to me, and I'm not trying to be simple here, I recognize that the scope is different, et cetera, but largely, like anything else, if at the moment you're initiating something like this, there are economies of scale to be had by the addition of optionality at the moment that you put this forward. Coming back or going back at some point would create not an insignificant cost difference. And so I guess what I need to understand is, is there any optionality around the funding request and us having a better understanding of different options rather than just the reduced North Grandstand option?
Thank you, and through the chair to Councillor Dumanowski, appreciate the question. I'll quickly go back to my briefing note, and I do indicate that Building Plan 1 and 2, that costing was current as of August 2023. So as far as the economies of scale, you can expect those to actually be quite a bit higher. The best estimate that I received, though rough, was about 20% extra. So when you're looking at $38.9 million for Building Plan 1, you can likely add another 20% to that, so we can say right around $50 million. In terms of Building Plan 2, an additional 20% would put that to, well, $38 million. So Building Plan 3, the estimated costing of $20 million is a very rough estimate, but it is an estimate as of today, so it is reflective of current costs. So that does make the difference between Building Plan 3, 2, and 1 maybe a little more significant than the current, or not current quotes, but the only formal quotes that we have at this time. In terms of the $250,000 for Building Plan 3, I believe that the cost of putting together the same drawings or the same concept for building plans 1 and 2 was more in that $400,000 or $500,000 range. Does that give a little bit of background?
Yeah, if I could, through the chair, it does. So my reference to economies of scale was around the $250,000 deeper dive, the costing and project scope. I just feel, certainly having been on council prior and this being a difficult decision item, it has really, and it sounds like it has the potential to be on the precipice of a third term before a decision is made. There are strong opinions in the public, certainly, for, in my opinion, less against, but nonetheless, difference of opinion. The difficulty I have with this is we are essentially pigeonholing ourselves and certainly fettering potentially, and if not entirely, the next council to make a decision based on a study that was extraordinarily limited in scope. We're talking about non-statutory public hearings. Where have we had that open, immediate opportunity for the public to have their say on this item? This has been, hanging on the heads of Medicine Exhibition Stampede and this community and the broader community for years. So I'm not opposed to a deeper, an additional costing for concept design and project costing. I just feel, I'll just add my comments, it's extremely short-sighted for us to preclude the opinion of the broader public and optionality from Medicine Exhibition Stampede, notwithstanding additional conversations with the province for funding to force ourselves to do a concept design and costing for only Plan 3, which essentially is, and it is what it is, just a replacement of grandstands in the most minimal way possible. And when I look at costing factors, and again, this is real money, this is public money, if the costing for example, Plan 2 is off by a percentage, which I don't doubt with an inflationary environment like we're living in, the delta right now on paper is less than 5 million, and yet from a scope standpoint is significantly different and an enhancement not only to what would be a replacement there, but a business plan for an entity that has been here for well over 100 years. And it's not about handing out public money to help groups who have been here a long time or who have the highest clout or the biggest, gong. It's about making sure that the heritage and the practice of agricultural and entertainment events is here to stay. Other communities, it's hard to compare ourselves to Calgary, but other communities have done the same and have had to have a leap of faith in these organizations in order to enable them to move forward. And when I say enable them, I don't mean to gift them. I mean to enable them so that they can continue that legacy of sport. And I do take exception and will argue that that there isn't necessarily need for additional conference space or meeting space. We as a council are constantly asked for additional spaces for the public to meet, never mind assemble. So for me, it's short-sighted, and the fact that we've tiptoed through this issue, I'm not going to say graciously, for years, it frustrates me significantly. And I've been here along the way, and I've been openly advocating, and I've heard from the public when I've made those comments. I'll hear from them tonight, but I've openly been asking for a final determination for a meaningful replacement of a facility to be had. And I just feel that this is forcing, again, I'll end on that, and pigeonholing us into a very small, limited scope replacement that doesn't serve anyone, quite frankly. Those are my comments.
I'm just wondering, being we're getting into almost debate, if we should put a motion on the floor, or?
Yes, please.
I think we should do that, so if someone put a motion.
Yeah, I can do that. I move that City Council approves the changes to policy. Oh, no, that is the wrong one. Sorry. Ron, you just about got a salary increase, though. It is, I move that City Council approves a budget amendment of $250,000 to fund a preliminary concept design and project costing for reduced North Grandstand option.
I'll second that motion.
Thank you.
Joe? Joe's hands up.
It looks like Councillor Robbins is the next speaker on the
Managing Director, Doctor, just kidding. Joe's hands was up. That's what I'm trying to say.
If I may
Councillor McGrogan.
respond to a few of those points, no issue if I can't. There's just a couple things I wouldn't mind clarifying if that's
Yeah, go
okay.
ahead, Managing Director.
I'd just like to note that the current drawings that we have for building plans 1 and 2 are only 30% drawings. So it's not as if we wouldn't need to come back anyways, even if we went forward with one of the existing plans. So we'd still have to come back and potentially, have this issue rest with the next council, regardless of what we do today. So that's still an issue. And then I'd also say, I wouldn't say that the proposed new North Grandstands are minimal. There are certain upgrades. It would be stadium seating. We've had conversations with the Stampede, and they've made it very clear that stadium seating is essential to have. That's just what a modern grandstand looks like, and we've taken their advice and we support that. So I wouldn't necessarily say that we are rebuilding the same grandstands that were built in 1965, or that we're not suggesting that we do. I would say that it provides the same, it provides the existing level of service in a more modern way. There's no expansion of service level, other than, of course, perhaps having stadium seating, but it is just an upgrade of what is currently there. But I do appreciate your perspective, and I just wanted to make those points. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Robbins.
Thank you, and through the chair. I guess I'm struggling a little bit as well with the implementation plan. So if we could just talk about that a little bit. So if the $250,000 action was approved, then fleet facilities management and asset management would engage with the current consultants. Is that Saracon? We're not Saracon.
No, that would be the engineer and the architect.
Okay, so the ones who did the plan for the, okay.
Correct, yeah.
Same people, okay.
Yeah.
This is the questions I need answered. So, through an existing standing officer and manage the design work, and this is where I get, I lose it a little bit. With MHES representatives as stakeholders being engaged for design input as the primary occupant and operator, I'm not really sure how that defines what Medicine Hat Stampede Exhibition is in this process. So one of the first decisions of this council was to extend their lease or re-sign the lease, or, for that length of time. The buildings belong to Medicine Exhibition and Stampede. They don't belong to the city of Medicine Hat. And so I'm really struggling, I guess, with how the representatives would be engaged as stakeholders when the board is actually the owner of the buildings that we're talking, their structures that we're talking about. So I'm kind of worried that, what if the board is like, we don't like that design? We would like to do something different. We think this is what we need for our facility. This is what we need for different events we want to bring in. And then the city says, well, no, we're limiting the scope of it to this thing that we think you want. So how does that engagement practically take place? Because I don't really like them listed here as stakeholders being engaged for design input when they're actually the owners of the structures and the buildings we're talking about.
Sure. And through the chair, good question, Councillor Robbins. So in this scenario, the city would own the project and would manage the project and would work collaboratively with MHES to determine the scope of the project. So in that case, we would work together and hopefully come to some kind of conclusion. And if we didn't, there'd certainly be, a project charter which would speak to any disagreements and how we would sort those out. That isn't in the body of the briefing note, but though that language does exist in other agreements, so we can certainly go from there.
So, okay, so if the city is acting as the project manager, and we say we will fund the city to be the project manager, doesn't the Medicine Hat Exhibition and Stampede Board get to make the decisions then? Up until the $250,000 is spent, because if that's what we agree to. But if the city is acting as the project manager, we're not the decision maker. It's almost like that Stampede would hire the city to manage the project, but the decisions about the project wouldn't belong to the city, or shouldn't belong to the city. I'm just trying to figure out how it would work to respect their autonomy and the fact that it's their space. It's on our leased land, sure, but we signed that lease, so now they can do what they want. They need support. There's a big economic impact of the Stampede within the city of Medicine Hat. We've seen that before, and that was in the Saracon report and other things that we've read about the Stampede. So I'm just really struggling to know, like, we'll consult them, but I'm not sure that goes far enough for me. And if you say, like, we're acting as the project manager, then who is the one that says what project we want? To go back to Councillor Dumanowski's point, if the Stampede says, no, we want option 1, and we want you to project manage the design of option 1, is that possible? Or are we saying, as the city, we won't let you have option 1 or 2, we will only project manage option 3? This goes back to Councillor Dumanowski's issue, I think.
Thank you, and through the chair, I think I'll call on Manager Bonnet. We worked very closely with Jeff and his team. Jeff, fortunately for Jeff, is in Norway today. But I think Mr. Bonnet
Lucky
can
Jeff.
likely provide an answer.
Well, hello, Manager Bonnet. Welcome to the Horseshoe.
Thank you
Help
very
me
much.
out, please, if you could.
Thank you, and through the chair. Councillor Robbins, you've asked some good questions. So in the process of managing the project, we want to make sure that we're delivering a project. So the stakeholders will have a vested say in this, and as Managing Director Hutter indicated, we will have a project charter. And that project charter really outlines the deliverables, the roles and responsibilities, and we want to make sure that as key stakeholders that their needs are represented. So when it comes to the project management aspect, in this particular ask, we're looking to develop a project for Building 3 so that council can make a decision. If the decision is to proceed with one of the other options, we can talk about how we can move forward with that project management, whether that's the city doing the project management or the Stampede grounds. So for the purpose of this package today is to bring forward an option 3 to the 30% level.
Okay, thank you. And so what you're saying is if we agreed to spend this money to develop an option 3, that the Stampede within the charter of your project management, their role would be defined, how they contribute, how we contribute is all going to be contained in a document that everyone can negotiate before it begins?
That is correct, yes.
Okay, thank you. That helps me a lot.
Councillor Sharps.
Thank you, Chairman Grogan. I do have a couple of questions. They're a little bit piecemeal, so bear with me, Managing Director Hutter. So 1.4% tax increase, that would be, if we went with option 3, that would be our increase over a period, additional increase rather, over 5 years, did you say, or? Is it?
Are you done your question?
No, I'm asking one by one, because so I might cross out some of the other questions, depending on your answer.
Okay.
Chairman Gogan.
Yeah.
May I proceed?
Go ahead, yeah.
Thank you, and through the chair to Councillor Sharps, and sorry, that's 1.04, not 1.4.
thank you.
And that's permanent ongoing, it's not for 5 years, it's in perpetuity.
Okay. And that's, what if it was, so we have this listed as a grant, what if it was a loan? What does that change to the dynamics of tax increase?
Thank you, and through the chair to Councillor Sharps, we did explore that possibility back in February. Our finance team took a deep dive into the various loan arrangements, and it was determined and somewhat supported through the Saracon report that the idea of loan repayment is reasonably unlikely. The way that it was initially presented was, I believe, a 20% loan. And at that 20%, we deemed it unlikely that that loan would be paid back. And we do have a policy 0141, I believe, I can't remember the exact number, but it's a loans and guarantees policy. And that policy speaks to administration needing a level of certainty that a loan can be repaid before providing a loan. And perhaps City Solicitor Bullitt could jump in, but I do believe that if we grant a loan to a nonprofit, that we do need to have a bylaw with a public hearing. Is that true?
Yes, to loan to a nonprofit requires a bylaw, and the bylaw would require advertising.
Okay, so I guess as a citizen, I hear, first of all, I want to say I'm actually with Councillor Dumanowski in terms of the frustration on 4 years. I feel incredibly bad for the Medicine Hat Stampede because, I mean, it's not fair to not be able to make decisions going forward. However, I'm also a little bit not on the alignment with this is taxpayer dollar, and as a taxpayer, I don't want an additional 1.04 tax increase because we're funding wholly or in part of anything. Because if let's just say we do this 250 and there's a 40% agreement with the province, and if the province doesn't come through, I mean, they haven't come through yet. So how much more time are we giving the province?
Thank you, and through the chair, and I mentioned this back in February, and frankly, I still believe it to be true. That Saracon report was presented in November of 2024. Prior to that, at least in my opinion, I haven't seen anything that provides enough objective evidence for administration to come up with a well-thought-out, unbiased, educated recommendation to council. So while I do understand that, if you look at the first day that this project was announced back in 2021, or maybe late 2020, I can understand that frustration, but frankly, administration only received the Saracon report 6 months ago. So everybody has a different perspective. My perspective is that the clock started in November, once administration had information to actually look at, synthesize, and present to council with a recommendation. Prior to that, I'm not sure that there was enough information to come to council for a recommendation.
Okay, fair enough. I had a question with, if again, this has been on the books for quite a while, but you're right, perception about where. Is there a reason we didn't budget for it in the 2025 budget? If we knew that this was on the table and we were going forward, like, I don't understand why it's a budget amendment versus in the budget.
Well, the budget was passed in December, through the chair to Councillor Sharps. The budget was passed in December of 2024. The Saracon report came out in November, and we didn't present on the Saracon report till early in the new year. So there wasn't any direction from council to proceed. So I'm not really quite sure, frankly, like what we would have budgeted for at that point, because there was never any direction from council to proceed with the project. We hadn't addressed the findings of the Saracon report during the budget deliberations.
But that doesn't come from us, right? I think I get the feeling that, so if this was something that we wanted, kind of like the composting plant, it gets put into the budget, and then we debate if it's in there. I guess I'm just a little concerned about budget amendments all the time. Just putting that out there as a concept, because the public's purse is, I just would like to finish my thought. Thank you very much. The public purse is, it's tight. It is so tight right now. And so an additional 1.04% increase to them is like 5.6. And so if you add on to that, we're getting well over 6, and that's just hard. That is just hard. So I just wanted to make sure that the public understands why we didn't budget, or if we did, like why we didn't do it, like what was our reasoning, because they expect us to be diligent about their money. So I understand what you're saying, but we've also been looking at it for a few years. So a part of me is like of two minds on this. One last question, you might not be able to answer it, is I feel like and please do not take any offense to this, Medicine Hat Stampede, but I feel like, I see you giggling up there, but I feel like we just are putting money into a car instead of buying a new car. So Medicine Hat Stampede is beautiful. It's on city land. It's prime real estate. It's stunning. It's beautiful. But would it be better and cheaper to move it to the north?
Thank you, and through the chair, I've certainly heard some concepts that relate to the idea that you've just shared. If council is interested, I would, I'd be willing to explore that, but would certainly wait for a formal direction from council to do so.
So may I get clarification? So we actually don't know. I guess if we are in the position, like right now, as much as I love the Institute of the Stampede and everything that it brings to I'm struggling with 1.04 tax increase, and I really am struggling with that. Especially because it only fixes a grandstand. That's the only thing it fixes is that. Go ahead.
Sorry, and
no, don't be.
Through the chair to Councillor Sharps, just to clarify, the 1.04% relates to Building Plan 1, which is the most expensive. And,
okay.
And frankly, actually, that amount will probably increase because those,
yeah,
we can probably add 20% to the cost.
Sure.
But we have about 0.53%, which is associated with Building Plan 3, the reconstruction of the north grandstands and rehabilitation to the existing.
Can you
south.
repeat that?
0.53.
0.53, okay, sorry. That's still 0.53, okay. And that is based on as-is plans, or is that with the 20% projected increase?
Well, thank you. Through the chair to Councillor Sharps, the $250,000 would bring us closer to a full understanding of exactly what the cost would be. The preliminary discussions that we had would, showed that cost would be around that $20 million mark, which would be $10 million grant from the city, which would be a 0.53% tax rate increase. So the estimate for the tax rate increase for Building Plan 3, I would say is more accurate than for Building Plans 1 and 2. I would expect that those two would likely, actually, I can guarantee that those first two would increase. The 0.53 is likely to be around 0.53.
Okay. I think that was my. So you have not a rough idea if we were to just build a whole new facility in a different location? We would have no idea about that.
Thank you. And through the chair to Councillor Sharps, yeah, without without actually having, a budget to go out and explore what that cost would be, I think that the figures we'd be providing you would be so ballpark that I'm not sure they would be valuable.
No problem. Yeah. So I guess in my mind, I'm hearing $250,000 motion on the table just decides if we're spending 10 million, 12 million, or 14 million. That's really all this study is going to do. Nope. But either way, we're going to spend a minimum $10 million.
Thank you. And through the chair to Councillor Sharp, so the $250,000 is associated with exploring Building Plan 3. The $250,000 study has already been invested into Building Plans 1 and 2. So they are at that 30% design stage, Building Plans 1 and 2. We'd be looking to bring Building Plan 3 to that same stage. And the Building Plan 1 and 2 are already there. MHES has completed that work with some provincial grant funding that they received and some of their own funding as well.
But it is almost, just I want to make sure I'm really clear, but I guess I'm almost hearing, oh, you wanted to say something. But a part of me is just understanding that if I agree to this $250,000, and you do it and you get the work done, we're still looking at 10 million, minimum to even do the next step. I hate studies for studies. I just hate studies.
Through the chair to Councillor Sharps, yeah, I certainly understand your frustration with the concept of studies for studies, but this would be a requirement to proceed with construction. So it's not as if, like, you couldn't go forward with construction without doing that. So frankly, to support the $250,000 in your mind, you would
Thank you for saying that
expect to
5
continue.
different ways. I finally caught on. Thank you.
Well, if I may add to that, just to build on your comments, I think there's more as well. You did mention there's other conditions that would relate to that, the 250 as well, correct? And could you just remind us of what they are again?
And through the chair, to me, the most important would be that we do have a guarantee of funding from the province. I can't speak for the Stampede, but at this point, I am not aware of that funding being guaranteed. I believe they're still working on that. So we would be looking, before we proceed with what would be around that $10 million grant, we'd be looking for a guarantee from the province of 40%, as well as my other recommendation would be that the Stampede engages with local partners, private fundraising, et cetera, to fund 10% of the total project cost.
Thank you. Councillor Knodel, you're up, finally.
Okay. All right, through the chair. So I'm just curious, Managing Director Hutter, if we ever did get the study from, or the evaluation of sustainability from the province. I know that there was a comment about the province, and I'm reading here that it was supposed to come back, Deloitte was going to do a study that was supposed to come back in Q1 of 2025. Do we have the results of that? Am I missing something?
Thank you. And through the chair to Councillor Knodel, no, the province has decided to not release that information. But when I spoke to them prior to their recent announcement, which they actually made in Medicine Hat, they did indicate that the decisions that stemmed from the report would somewhat allude to what was found in the report, if that makes sense. So a few of the things that were announced were that there's some new funding. As I mentioned earlier, there's funding related to support for the creation of strategic plans. I believe there's also some funding that's earmarked for board governance training, that kind of thing, as well as facility condition assessments.
Through the chair. Thank you. So it wasn't anything drastic or anything along the lines of these are not good investments. Like there wasn't anything like that came out of the report.
Thank you. And through the chair, without physically having that report, I can't make an assessment on your question. I will say that it was a sustainability report, so they are obviously interested in determining what the sustainability is. So you can read into that whatever way. I will say the thing that I was looking for, that I felt was most important, was whether or not the province renewed their interest in continuing operating grant funding. MHES receives around $400,000, I think it's $397,000 annually, something like that. And that money is guaranteed. I've had conversations with the province. There's no indication that funding will disappear. Hopefully it increases. They wouldn't say, but they did say that it won't disappear. And that, frankly, is what I was looking for from that study. And we do have that information. That funding's not going anywhere. So that is very important. We have confirmed that.
One last comment, if you're okay with it. Appreciate the information, even if it's not super clear to you about, but I do appreciate that. I made a comment in one of the prior meetings that I was prepared to support the Stampede. That's not changed. I think that it is unfortunate that it's been such a drawn-out process, and I appreciate Councillor Dumanowski's comment about it feels, like we're spending money to the opportunity costs of this decision is difficult because of the cost of building and so forth. But I think ultimately, I'm getting antsy. We need to do something. If we make the wrong decision, we don't know until we're on the other side of it. And I'm hopeful that we are just going to move forward with some action, because that grandstand is not going to survive much longer. So I'm hopeful that council is in support of this motion tonight. If not something bigger and greater, that would be even better. But I'm looking forward to moving forward and just getting the getting those seats built. So thank you.
City Manager Mitchell, if you just give me a sec, because I'm going to put a question out that might dovetail into where you're going. So I'm just listening to all the comments here, and I guess riddle me this one. Why are we spending $250,000 until we know if the province is in? How can we, as a council, say, you know what, we commit to being in, here's your engagement ring, we're in, but why spend the $250 until we know that the province is in? So I guess what I'm asking, is there a way that we could put a motion forward that says, you know what, we support Medicide Exhibition and Stampede up to X number of dollars under these conditions, and then move forward? Would that, without spending the $250, because if the province comes back and says, we're not funding, because we're funding, we like the convention center piece, but we don't like the fact you're just replacing grandstands, and we're not gonna give you 40%. So I'm wondering if that was considered, or I'm wondering if there's a way that we could find that out without slowing this down any further.
Thank you, and through the chair, yeah, we have considered that, and the justification for the $250,000 is to try to get something as close to shovel-ready as possible in the event that the province doesn't guarantee, or guarantees or doesn't guarantee funding. Frankly, it allows us to be a little more nimble if they don't, and then say a couple of years later they do come back to the table, or maybe there's some stimulus funding that we weren't expecting. The issue right now is that the north grandstands are in such disrepair that there does need to be some kind of fairly swift action, or just a decision, some kind of certainty one way or another. Spending the $250,000 now gets us closer to doing something with or without the province's involvement. And, you know, perhaps we would have to bring it back to council, and the ask would be larger, of course. Well, it would be 40% larger if the province wasn't involved, but there is certainly a risk of the grandstands needing to be demolished sooner rather than later. So going forward with that spend now does put us into, in my mind, a fairly strategic position.
Thank you. City Manager Mitchell.
Thank you, and through the chair, and just to a couple of points being raised. And one thing that this ask has created is the capital nonprofit grant framework, so that these kind of asks, when they come forward, we can make it clear to those asking for the funding of exactly what our expectations are. So I'm not saying it's been ideal for the exhibition and Stampede, because there's been so much back and forth, and I appreciate their patience, but it has led us to a better system moving forward, hopefully, for the other nonprofits. It doesn't help the situation now, but we've ironed that out a bit. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Van Dyke.
Yes, thank you through the chair. So as everyone has mentioned, this has been quite the lengthy process, but the thing that I've struggled with this entire time is the idea of this extra build associated with having to replace the North Grandstand. And while I support the Medicine Hat Exhibition and Stampede, and I want to see them succeed, I've really, this entire time, struggled with the idea of anything beyond a one-to-one replacement. And so I appreciate this recommendation coming forward, because I think you've recognized some of the financial constraints that the city is in, as well as the need associated with the exhibition and Stampede. And so I do support this building plan number 3. I understand the need for doing further work, and there is cost associated with that. But I know there's a lot of unknowns and variables, and I think this is the first step and shows a commitment on the part of the city towards a Stampede. Thank you.
Seeing no other speakers, I think we will vote on this motion. Thank you. So it is 5-2 in favor. Thank you. Thanks for the presentation, Managing Director Hutter. It was quite the grilling, and the Medicine Hat Exhibition and Stampede that are here. Thank you for your patience. It's been a long process to even get to this stage. I don't know if we got a win out of that or not, but we're somewhere further than what we were half an hour ago. Okay, next we have 11.1, which is Energy Business Strategic Review. And it's defining municipally controlled corporation, which is, an acronym is MCC, and Rate Review Committee. The sponsor is Energy, Land, and Environment. And I'll turn this over to City Manager Mitchell to give it a introduction. Thank you.
Thank you, and through the chair, in September 5th, 2023, City Council directed us to explore the possibility of a MCC or municipally controlled corporation. And I have to say that I really appreciate Managing Director Pancoast and the team, because this was a true collective effort shepherding this through with the outside third-party review. So I will turn it over to Managing Director Pancoast. Thank you.
Thank you, City Manager Mitchell, and good evening, Council. Online, we do have Solicitor Clausen. We also have a representative from KPMG, Tim Swanson, and members of the project team as well will be joining me in presenting. This has definitely been a team effort. It is an interest to both the energy side of our equation as well as the municipal side of our equation. So we have had really great representation from both sides to make sure that it's a well thought through, balanced approach, and of course with the assistance of KPMG throughout. So tonight we are asking for a decision. This is quite a lengthy document. Some of it may feel quite dry at times. This is required as part of a regulatory disclosure process before any future next steps related to the potential establishment of an MCC or municipally controlled corporation. So we will be sharing quite a bit of information. Some of it you have seen before, some of it is new, but we will highlight that along the way. And I will offer a recap as to how we got here and why this matters, because this has been quite a lengthy process. The business plan and related disclosure considerations we will walk through in detail noted above there, and we'll finalize with a reminder of the value proposition and overall recommendation for tonight's decision request and what the potential next steps look like if that recommendation is supported, because we are asking for a decision, but it's not the final decision tonight. In terms of background, I think we all know this. Energy and the City of Medicine Hat are synonymous in terms of gas city. We really are founded on roots of natural gas and abundant supply of cheap, affordable natural gas. And that has meant that we have, through time, through multiple decades, over 100 years, behaved as an energy business inside a single legal entity as a municipality. And often how we've approached that has been called into question because their approaches are quite incongruent at times, where the municipal side is the typical service delivery for the benefit of the common good and is property taxpayer funded, low risk, high transparency, for instance, whereas the typical business side, at least in private industry, is really focused on generating profits, focused on economic growth, have experts as decision makers, including at the board level, and yet are transparent where they need to be and otherwise cautious on commercially sensitive or strategic areas so that they're not laying their cards out for all the world to take advantage of, and reporting standards can differ. Our energy business has offered significant advantage to the city over that last 100 years, historically really driven by the natural gas side of the business, where we had the abundant supply, and in fact that fed other businesses, including the electricity business and several of the local industries in the area. Those strong profits, however, from the natural gas side have declined, and more recently being replaced with profits from the electric generation side of the business. And both of those, that history of profits has really funded significant amenities within our city while being able to retain relatively low or at least competitive property taxes. We have a number of amenities that are punching greater than a typical mid-sized city weight would be able to do. We also have retained our energy rate advantage. We show council on at least an annual basis how we benchmark compared to neighboring municipalities, and particularly on our distribution rates. We are quite low, and we're typically at least competitive, if not more competitive, on our energy rates. And on top of all of that, on top of the extra amenities, the competitive property taxes, and the competitive and first-class energy and utility rates, we have also contributed to the Medicine Hat Endowment Fund, which historically was the Medicine Hat Reserve. Certainly that is now to the tune of $200 million, which now produces a annual annuity, is what I refer to it as, but essentially interest benefits on an annual basis that we can benefit from. The graph there really is a reminder that even just in the last 10 years from which this data was taken, a repeat from the energy strategy that we provided last fall, essentially indicates that the energy business has provided over $500 million, $500 million in the last 10 years. But certainly that outlook isn't necessarily what we're seeing going forward. And that is quite a concern. Where we have been is not the fortune teller of where we're headed. We were at a spot where we were, our core value, as I understand it from predecessors, was self-determination. We could decide our own fate because we could afford to. We can no longer afford to decide our own fate. We are working with regional partners. We're seeking subsidies where they exist. And we are revisiting how we look at our delivery of services going forward. And that's really because our natural gas production profits that we had so readily become reliant on don't exist anymore. Instead of large profits from that business, we are actually paying cash out of reserves and proceeds into paying end-of-life liabilities for those gas assets because we made the difficult decision in 2019 to essentially close 75% of our wells because they were no longer economic. And that means only 10 to 15% of our current energy supply comes from our own production. However, despite what used to be high riches from natural gas and is now a concern and spend on the natural gas side, that historic cross-subsidization reliance, where we're used to relying on funding from the natural gas proceeds and have come to rely on that to offset property taxes on the municipal side to provide those services, that is still lingering and something that we've been able to continue to do with the recent high proceeds from the electric generation side. However, electric generation is now at risk, as I noted too in the previous slide. Not only is there a low commodity price forecast, which is expected to last for a period of time, that will impact electric generation profits, but significant other risks for that business, including market redesign, including energy transition and related decarbonization regulations that we're expected to comply with. So the competitiveness is a concern. On top of that, across the electric generation and distribution businesses, we are forecasting a $500 million spend in that business for capital improvements, for end-of-life replacements, those sorts of things within the next 10 years. And that is before any energy transition capital that we may be looking to pursue or forced to pursue, depending on the regulations. So the real concern, and you will see this echoed in our financials with or without an MCC, is that the financial outlook for the city is currently on an unsustainable trend of declining city reserves. And you'll have heard that messaging as part of our budget process. So it's really quite important that the decisions we make on the energy business, which has been helping to refill those reserves, is the right one. Because if we get it wrong and those reserves end up going away, and or the revenues from the energy business go away, and goodness gracious, if it happens to turn into a liability for the city, that can only be made up through property tax increases, and that's something we're all trying to avoid. On top of the business within a municipality, we often do get questions of the business philosophy. It has percolated from time to time over the years. And in recent years, it's been a long-standing pricing philosophy where distribution is cost plus. That mimics what happens in the provincial side of the equation for the poles and wires, the regulated utility side of the business, and commodities in terms of the energy as fair market. And that's partly because we don't just serve Medicine Hat, we serve customers outside of Medicine Hat as well. So this council had been contemplating a rate review, and before it was confirmed what council meant by that, we also happened to see record commodity prices within 2023 summer. People may remember 32 cents in July of 2023, and that caused significant concern that it was impacting affordability, and council needed to respond. And council did respond together with recommendations from staff. And ultimately, that resulted in the pursuit of expert advice as to how to proceed with the energy business. And the request through our RFP for the potential consultant was to confirm the overall strategic approach for the energy business that would provide best value to the community. And recognizing that that would need to be determined in light of the city's unique exemption that protects us from significant transmission costs provincially, for instance, but also the broader strategic landscape, that changing landscape talking about market redesign, decarbonization, and more. So we did have the RFP out, and KPMG was a successful bidder, and ultimately they provided a report to council, both enclosed and open, because there is naturally some information that is more sensitive to be shared internally and not to be exposed to the public. That is one of the realities of our energy business that I know the public struggles with. And that the resulting report from KPMG indicated that yes, there are strategic challenges and landscape challenges that do jeopardize the energy business's ability to deliver value long term. And ultimately, because it is uncertain with increasing complexity, KPMG did recommend that we move towards a skill-based, focused board to better position the energy business for success. And really, we are talking about the governance model for the energy business. And in their report, KPMG did recognize, and I think it resonated with council, that today council wears three hats. One focusing on the energy business and how to drive best value for the energy business. One focused on the residents, providing typical legacy municipal services to the benefit of our residents and using tax-funded public purse to do so. And our utility ratepayers. And of course, there is a difference between the utility side and the energy side. The energy side is the commodity of electricity or natural gas. The utility side is the poles, wires, pipes, etc. And council on the utility rate payer side of things is the rate regulator and needs to make decisions there. So with an energy business inside the municipal model, and council wearing three hats with almost a requirement to compromise across the three, that may actually be sub-optimizing energy business value, and recognizing that we have concerning outlook of where the energy business is going and the long-term viability of that energy business. The recommendation is to provide focused, skill-based value back to the energy business by separating those hats and instead having a fit-for-purpose governance approach. The fit-for-purpose governance approach proposes true separation of those hats, where the energy business is governed by a skill-based board. The rates are approved through a rate review committee with delegated authority from council to act as the rate regulator within our area and still maintain our exemption. And then that would leave council to focus with their municipal hat on, to focus on value of municipal services to the resident using the taxpayer funded purse to deliver that. And the checks and balances are there simply because the MCC would still report on a performance basis into council, but otherwise be governed through key governing documents that we will walk through separately. The rate review committee itself would be skill-based and provide an informed view of how best to ensure a viable utility business long-term while meeting the needs of the ratepayers through a more rigorous rate review and approval process. And then, of course, council being able to focus on the municipal side as well. There is recognition that it will cost money to create an MCC with some ongoing costs, but the expectation is that the added value from a focused skill-based board would overcome those costs and ultimately add net value to the dividend, which would be transferred to the city as the sole shareholder, and then the city could benefit from those funds and reallocate them accordingly. So where are we at with this process? That was the background to catch us up to where we are. That walked us through the assess phase where we engaged KPMG to do the energy business review. We spoke to council on April 22nd with the blueprint stage. A good chunk of what you'll see tonight is the same, repeated from there. And that was articulating what are we talking about, how do we get there, and what would it take to get there. Tonight we are supplementing that work with a disclosure document, so to speak, that is required under the regulations. And that layers in expert review of certain financial treatments. That expert review is from KPMG. And it is a request for council to consider moving to a public hearing as a next step. So you'll see that as part of our recommendation. But this isn't the final step. Even if council says yes tonight, the intent from here would be to go to a public hearing, which staff are proposing could be at the end of June. And if after that point, council considers public hearing content and then decides to keep going, then it would be a resolution to direct staff to start implementing an MCC at that point. And it would be roughly a year until an MCC would be live. So there's at least tonight, plus one more if council decides to keep going down the path. And during that time of implementation, if we get that far, there is a new election, and depending on what future councils would be interested in that, they always have the option to unwind where we've gotten to with some additional process to get there. And we could certainly answer questions about that later in the presentation. So new since April 22nd, essentially we have obtained that expert guidance around financial treatment, primarily looking at municipal accounting standards, public accounting standards versus international financial reporting standards, IFRS, and that's because using IFRS is what an MCC would do going forward. We have also, as part of that, included draft financial projections in the documentation, and a formal business plan has also been developed, and we'll be walking through elements of that within this content. And we have commenced communication strategy. We attended a Shape Your City engagement at Big Marble Go on May 1st. We have established a Shape Your City website, and the information is there, but certainly you can go to our municipal website and find your way to Shape Your City and find the content there. We will look to continually update that as appropriate. And we are continuing to develop out our communication plans with more engagement expected. And we have continued to progress some of the items, including the key governing documents, to make sure that as questions arise, we're able to provide some draft answers for those. And before we move into the next stage of the presentation, I've mentioned it already, but I'll mention it again. The outlook, regardless of an MCC, is one of concern that we need to be mindful of, with reserves expected to be declining through time. And that concern exists, again, with or without the MCC. However, in the short term, you will see an MCC will make that worse because it does take an investment to create the MCC. But again, the hope is that with a dedicated board, skilled and focused on greater energy-related topics, that they would be able to help turn that around and deliver a long-term viable dividend for the benefit of the city. So with that, we will be taking turns through the presentation. It is a lengthy one, and it is reflective of cross-functional work. So I will be inviting members of the team to present. And with this first part, it is over to Mr. Clausen.
Thank you, Managing Director Pancoast. Next up is a discussion of the business plan and disclosure considerations. Before deciding whether to establish an MCC, public engagement is required, and there are two key components to this: information disclosure and a public hearing. As for information disclosure, prior to the public hearing, the city must disclose certain key information about the proposed corporation, including the services it will provide, the name of its shareholder, the geographic locations of its services, its projected utility rate structure, as it would be a utility business, and a market impact analysis regarding competition with the private sector. And all of this material is in the business plan. And as for the public hearing, the information disclosure must occur at least 30 days before the date of the hearing. The hearing must be advertised in accordance with the Municipal Government Act, and the notice must state the usual details, such as the date, time, and place of the hearing. And Travis will now discuss the scope of the MCC.
Thanks, Matt. The next section will provide more details regarding the scope of the municipal controlled corporation. To provide a general overview, the MCC will be wholly owned and controlled by the City of Medicine Hat. It will be governed by an independent, skills-based board of directors accountable to the city as the sole shareholder. The MCC will include operations of electric generation, the distribution business units, along with the energy marketing services related to these business units. A dividend policy would be in place to allow the city to continue to benefit as the owner, but to also allow the MCC to be self-sustainable on a go-forward basis. More detailed scope regarding utility distribution services. Utility distribution services serves residential, commercial, and industrial customers in our service territory. These services include distribution of gas and electricity, engineering, and construction of the systems, including all capital work. And from a customer standpoint, there'll be no identifiable change from what they see today. Electric generation also supplies generation for residential, commercial, industrial customers in our service territory. Services for electric generation include operation and maintenance of the generation facilities, development and implementation of capital, and the engineering services for these assets. The city also interacts with the provincial grid, exporting and importing power when it is economical to do so. Energy marketing includes commercial agreements, marketing and trading of commodities, hedging of the commodity exposures, retail rate design, business development and strategic project support and leadership, as well as internal support for the division, such as evidence-based analysis and long-term financial planning. These graphs provide an overview of our service territory. The graph on the left is for the natural gas distribution service territory, and then on the right is the electric distribution service territory. Just to provide some clarity, the maroon and green is the city's portion of the service territory, and then on the right is the territory with the green border around it. In general, they are very similar, but there are slight differences with these two territories. In regards to the location of the MCC services for electric generation, we do this through two generation sites, both a main, which is down by the river, that's been our historic site, plus the newer developed remote site. The City of Medicine Hat, as you probably are aware, has an exemption under the Electric Utilities Act that allows us to be the sole provider of electricity in the city's service territory. As mentioned, the city also has a connection to the Alberta grid through the Al Rothbauer substation located just by 23rd Street Northwest. This makes the city a market participant and is subject to market rules when building city generation assets into the grid. Market impact analysis, the MCC will assume all cities' electric utility distribution systems and electric generation and energy marketing business units. Those units will continue to operate in the city's existing service franchise areas. And the electric utilities exemption, as mentioned, will continue under the MCC. So no identifiable change from a customer perspective. I'll now pass it to Matt for the governance and ownership.
Thank you, Travis. In this next section, we discuss the governance and ownership of the proposed corporation and rate review committee, starting with the corporation. There are several key documents, governance documents, which would bind the corporation, its directors, and officers. One of the most important is a unanimous shareholder agreement, which the city is required to have if it chooses to establish a municipally controlled corporation. The unanimous shareholder agreement must address certain matters, including the rights and liabilities of the shareholder, director elections and powers, service delivery standards and decision-making structure, a dispute resolution process, and a method for addressing public feedback received regarding a proposed material change to the business. In the unanimous shareholder agreement, it would be important to balance municipal oversight with commercial autonomy. Two other key governance documents would include the Articles of Incorporation, which would deal with core matters such as the company name, its authorized business activities, and share structure, and a general bylaw, which would deal with matters such as restrictions on directors' borrowing powers and restrictions on share issuances. Next slide, please. The city would have an important role in the corporation. It would be the sole shareholder and therefore the sole owner. This would bring with it several basic rights, such as the right to vote at all shareholder meetings, the right to receive dividends when declared, the right to receive remaining property of the corporation on dissolution, and the right to determine the number of and appoint the directors. There would also be additional rights provided under the unanimous shareholder agreement, such as the right to specify and receive additional reports from the corporation regarding financial performance, enterprise risk, and service level performance. The proposed corporation would be governed by a board of directors, and the proposed structure of the board is as follows. Up to 9 voting members, 7 independent, and 2 from council. We would recommend seeking individuals with skills and experience in key relevant areas, including utility businesses, project management and engineering, commodity markets and risk, and utility and environmental regulation. For tenure, the terms would be staggered, 3 years each, with a maximum of 2 reappointments, for a maximum total of 3 terms or 9 years. And the individual directors would have to be Canadian residents. The board mandate is an important one. Generally, the board would be responsible for the overall management or supervision of the management of the business and affairs of the corporation, subject to compliance with the Business Corporations Act, governing documents, and so on. To assist the board in overseeing the business, we would propose the creation of 4 subcommittees that would report to the board on 4 different key operational areas, including an audit committee to deal with things such as financial performance, an HR and governance committee to deal with matters such as CEO performance and succession planning, a capital projects and commodity portfolio committee to deal with such things as large-scale capital projects, and an environmental, social, and governance committee to deal with matters such as health and safety, Indigenous relations, and social responsibility. This would all be subject to change by the board chair. Similar to council and administration in a municipal setting, the directors and officers of the corporation would work together to run it, with the board being akin to council and the officers being akin to administration. The board would report into and be accountable to the city, and the officers would report into and be accountable to the board. Both the board and officers would have some important basic duties, including the duties to act honestly and in good faith, with a view to the best interests of the corporation, to exercise reasonable diligence, and to comply with the law and governing documents. Since the corporation would operate a utility business, the city is required to disclose the proposed rate structure. It is expected to remain generally consistent with past practice and to stay reasonably current with industry best practices. Distribution rates would be based on a cost-plus model, largely following the cost-plus principles accepted by the Alberta Utilities Commission, which is the rate regulator for the rest of the province. These rates would provide revenues that allow recovery of distribution expenses and capital depreciation and provide an allowable return. For commodity rates, the corporation would propose a default rate for approval by the rate regulator, and we also anticipate the corporation would reintroduce unregulated contract rates for competitive fixed and variable products. So who would be the rate regulator? We propose the introduction of the Rate Review Committee, exercising delegated authority from Council. This committee would be the rate regulator and would help achieve the following key objectives. It would help delineate between Council's conflicting role of protecting both ratepayer interests and shareholder interests, as the committee would make the final decisions regarding the corporation's regulated rates. It would increase decision-making transparency for rate setting, as there would be up to one non-voting community observer on the committee and formal opportunities for public feedback in the proposed rate approval process. And it would improve access to technical expertise in the rate setting process, as it would be a skills-based committee. We would propose the following structure for the Rate Review Committee: up to 8 members, 7 voting, 1 non-voting, up to 5 voting members chosen for their technical expertise, up to 2 voting members chosen from Council, and up to 1 non-voting community observer. For the technical members, we would recommend seeking individuals with skills and experience in the following areas: accounting and finance, regulatory processes, understanding of energy commodity markets, utilities, and engineering. For tenure, we would propose staggered terms of 3 years each, with 1 reappointment for a maximum of 2 terms or 6 years. And the city may need to seek members from outside of the city from time to time in order to gain or balance the skill set on the committee. This is a flow diagram on how the regulatory process would work. There are 3 main parts. The policies and parameters would be set in summer, July to August, followed by applications for the rate base and rates that would be approved in the fall. You would then go through the rate year, and this would be followed by January to February, which would include a review and any rate riders subject to the next set of rates for the following calendar year. Enhanced rigor. This is what the Rate Review Committee would bring to the table. Having a skills-based committee with an enhanced review and engagement process would provide enhanced rigor in the rate setting process. And although this would add time and cost to the corporation, it is proposed as an important check and balance on the corporation's rates and to increase ratepayer and city confidence. There's a lot of information on this slide. It shows the relationships between the various bodies: Council, the city, the corporation, and the Rate Review Committee. And I will just summarize a few key points. The city would own the proposed corporation and receive dividends from it. The Rate Review Committee would have delegated authority from Council, and it would approve the corporation's regulated rates. This next section of the presentation focuses on the proposed operating model for the corporation. The key legislative requirement for a municipally controlled corporation is that it must be financially and operationally independent. To that end, the proposed corporation would have a separate organizational structure, personnel, operational assets, and liabilities, with the board and officers being responsible for managing the corporation. The corporation would be expected to cover all operating, capital, and financing costs through rates and commercial operations, and the city would retain control as sole shareholder and owner. And now Travis, I'll turn it back over to Travis to go into more detail on the operations.
Thanks, Matt. In regards to staffing, the MCC would retain the current salaries, wages, tenure, and pension of the employees they took on. It would also include equivalent benefits. the collective bargaining agreements would transfer over to the MCC, as well as transferring the current team structure, but would include potentially adding a new CFO position, which is highlighted on the left. In regards to assets and systems, all assets and liabilities relating to the Municipal Control Corporation would be transferred to the MCC at net book value. Energy business-specific technologies and operational systems would also transfer to the MCC. The MCC would have a financial system that complies with the IFRS, the International Reporting Standards. These costs are included in the implementation costs, as well as remaining shared services performed by the city will continue via shared service contract with the Municipal Control Corporation. Finally, some risks and considerations. Just to highlight, the first two risks would be specific to the MCC, and the others are applicable to the business unit, whether it's under the existing structure or under the MCC. So under the MCC, there is a risk of higher interest rates impacting future costs of new debt. This is all dependent on how the risk profile of the MCC is perceived by lenders in the market. Also, there is the risk of an inaccurate dividend structure. This could be mitigated by designing appropriate prerequisites and parameters for the dividend. For ongoing business risks, as mentioned, this is whether it is an MCC or existing. Unanticipated capital requirements that could come up. Obviously, it's a very volatile market, which can produce financial projections that could be inaccurate. There's the rate setting that could result in rates that are too high or too low. Commodity cycles that could provide low net income for extended periods of time. And then also unanticipated regulatory requirements include environmental and market changes. I think this is, oh, sorry, back to Matt.
Thank you, Travis. There are some potential risks related to the corporation's debts and liabilities. If there are existing energy business related debts that the city would like the corporation to assume, lender consent would be required and could be refused. Assets transferred to the corporation would be owned and controlled by it. So although the city would own the corporation, it would no longer have direct control over those assets. However, some control would be retained through the governance documents, which together would impose certain restrictions on the director's powers to borrow and dispose of assets. Another potential risk is shareholder liability for operations. Generally, a shareholder is not liable for the operations of the corporation it owns shares in, but there are exceptions. As an example, any power withdrawn from the directors under the unanimous shareholder agreement would belong to the city, and the city would be responsible for it to the same extent as the directors would have been. This risk can be mitigated in the unanimous shareholder agreement by appropriately balancing municipal oversight with commercial autonomy. There may also be concern about shareholder liability for debts. As shareholder, the city generally would not be liable for the debts of the corporation, except in the case of city choice. For example, if the city were to provide a contractual loan guarantee, or if the city chose to assume the corporation's debts in order to dissolve it. There are certain other risk considerations. Other potential risks include difficulty attracting and retaining qualified directors, but this could be mitigated through clear board mandates and competitive compensation. IT cybersecurity, this risk exists with or without the corporation. It's not an incremental risk. Contractual, there are certain agreements that may need to be assigned to the corporation and the counterparties could refuse. However, it is common for contracts to require counterparties not to unreasonably withhold consent to assignments. There is reputational risk in that the public might perceive the corporation and the city as the same. Public messaging could help to mitigate this. And there is a potential timing risk in that regulatory approvals needed to operate the corporation may take longer than anticipated. However, the corporation could leverage the city's experience in dealing with these matters. And now Lola will discuss the financial aspects of the corporation.
Okay, so just taking a look at the financial requirements and assumptions, the MCC will be financially independent and self-sustaining. It will not be dependent on the city for its ongoing operations. Shared services, as was mentioned, will be obtained from the city, and the MCC will pay for these services. However, the city, as sole shareholder, retains control over the MCC's operations and finances, which meets the criteria of a government organization under public sector accounting standards and will be classified as a government business entity. Assets and liabilities related to the MCC, so electric generation, transmission, electric and gas distribution, will be transferred to the city, from the city to the MCC at book value. Facilities currently occupied by the MCC business units will also be transferred at book value. However, the city facility department will continue to maintain these facilities, and the MCC will pay for these services. The MCC will report under International Financial Reporting Standards, and the city reports under Public Sector Accounting Standards using the modified equity method. So the city will not consolidate the MCC line by line in its financial statements, but rather the city's investment in the MCC would be presented as a single line item on the statement of financial position. The city would hold all of the pre-existing debt prior to the establishment of the MCC, and would also show a promissory note receivable from the MCC to offset their pre-existing debt amounts. The promissory note would be a legal binding document between the city and the MCC. The city's share in the MCC's net income or loss would be reported as a single line item on the statement of operations. Dividends received from the MCC would reduce the carrying value of the investment rather than being reported as revenue. And additional disclosure is required on the city's financial notes regarding the MCC. So this slide highlights the differences between the two accounting standards. The borrowing costs during construction under public sector accounting are not capitalized. However, they would be capitalized under IFRS. Contributions from developers under public sector accounting standards, the revenues are matched with expenses. Under IFRS, the amounts received are amortized over the useful life of the asset. Asset retirement obligation, under public sector accounting standards, we use the ACFA 30-year discount rate. Under IFRS, we would use the market rate. There will be no change to depreciation and impairments as the city's current practices align with the IFRS standards. So as was previously mentioned, the assumption is that all current employee costs and other costs associated with the energy business units would continue as is under the MCC. The MCC will have one-time costs of $4 million, and this would include costs such as legal, accounting, and recruitment costs to set up the MCC, as well as software and IT costs to set up the new environments for the MCC. There will also be ongoing incremental costs, which will include CFO and board compensation, software licensing, and IT costs. The RRC will have one-time costs of $25,000, which includes legal and recruitment costs to set up the RRC, as well as ongoing incremental costs, which include committee compensation, consultants, and legal costs. We have also assumed that the Energy Transition Reserve would be transferred to the MCC, as well as the initial cash balance when the MCC is established. We have also assumed a dividend principal of the greater of $7 million or 30% of net income. The dividend principal will need to ensure that the MCC has sufficient cash to operate and is not eroding equity, but it also needs to be able to provide a dividend back to the shareholder. The city has a choice of how to include the MCC in its debt calculation. The MGA debt limit will remain at 2 times revenue, and the debt service limit will remain at 0.35 times revenue. So option 1 is to include the MCC's total revenue and debt amounts. This is currently what we are doing, so there would be no change from what we are currently doing. our debt limit would remain under the 70%. However, any future MCC debt could impact our debt limits. Under option 2, the city may choose not to include the results of the MCC in the debt limit calculation in order to allow the MCC to obtain incremental financing in the future that would not be subject to the debt limit restrictions. The city would show MCC net income as part of total revenue and would need to include any pre-existing debt of the MCC prior to the establishment of the MCC. The debt limit calculations would result in it being over 70%. However, any future MCC financing would not be required to be included and would therefore not impact the debt limits going forward. Option 3 is the same as number 2, but the city could offset the pre-existing debt with the promissory note receivable from the MCC. So in this instance, the city would show the MCC net income, but the pre-existing debt would be offset with the promissory note and therefore would have no impact on the debt calculation. The MGA is not really clear on the debt limit calculation, and so we believe that we could apply this option when calculating the debt limit. However, further investigation would be required. Based on our preliminary estimates, the forecast, there would be no change to the overall financial position as the assets and liabilities transferred to the MCC are replaced by the city's investment in the MCC. The city's cash balance is expected to decrease due to the cash transfer and the energy reserve transfer to the MCC. So because of the lower cash balance, the city would have less investment income, which will increase the budget gap. The MCC is expected to pay less dividends in the short term due to less profits and more cash required to be retained in the MCC for its operating and capital requirements. However, the city would not be required to fund any operating shortfall, capital, or growth requirements under the MCC operating model. So the $500 million capital program that was mentioned earlier would be funded by the MCC and not funded by the city. I do want to note that these cash flow concerns would exist whether the MCC is created or not due to the decline in the forecasted energy markets, which will impact the profits of the energy business units. So it will take some time for the MCC to get established, and so we are anticipating lower profits in the short term. However, with the increased expertise and oversight from the board, we are expecting better long-term benefits as well as increases in the dividends from the MCC. The city will need to continue to address the budget gap, and so by having the energy business in a separate entity, it should allow the city to focus more on how to achieve this. So the chart shows the impact to the city's operations. The municipal budget gap increases due to less investment income. The city will show the MCC net income, which replaces the existing energy business units net income, so those are removed. The reserves investment income would be reduced due to the transfer of energy transition reserve to the MCC. So we do see some short-term impact to the city's financial targets. As I mentioned, the budget gap is anticipated to increase due to the less cash retained in the municipality, resulting in less investment income. Reduction in cash due to transferring more cash to the MCC. The operating and capital reserves are forecasted to deplete, but this would happen whether the MCC was established or not. Free cash flow, or the dividend, is expected to be lower in the short term until the MCC can get established. However, the city would benefit from having that stable, consistent amount year after year. Debt limits should not be impacted. We are expecting that we should be able to go with option 3, and therefore we can offset that pre-existing debt with the promissory note from the MCC. So I'll turn it over to Rochelle to go through the value proposition.
Thank you, Director Barta. So a quick recollection, I know it's been already a lengthy presentation of the strategic context. The city's energy story has shifted from high prosperity to a somewhat precarious outlook in many ways. And the historical reliance of the financial energy proceeds by the city leaves the city vulnerable to future energy risk. And the reality is that that energy risk is a concern. The competitiveness of the city's energy business has weakened and is expected to weaken with regulatory pressures. Our level of competitiveness, particularly on the gas generation side of the business, gas-fired electric generation side of the business, is concerning with some of the carbon pricing penalties that it faces. But ultimately, a key message for council, regardless of MCC or not, is that if we cannot sustain the energy proceeds, that property taxes would need to offset the proceeds gap, and or services would need to be curtailed. So we're all hoping for a future where that isn't necessarily the case. That vulnerability, as I mentioned, exists with or without the MCC, but staff and certainly the project team support KPMG's recommendation to create an MCC for the energy business, and that really is to drive the extra skills and governance model and put that in place to ensure a very careful and prudent navigation of this increasingly complex energy landscape to drive the best value for the community. So specifically in terms of increased governance in a complex area, I mentioned that there is market redesign changes, there are carbon regulations on an ongoing basis shifting with every election, it seems, and more. It's certainly increasing in complexity, particularly with expectations of potential electrification, broader energy transition, et cetera. And ultimately, having the ability to access a skill-based board both for insight, but also with a critical eye to help navigate the challenges, mitigate risks wherever possible within the MCC, and for the benefit of the city, pursue opportunities as they arise, and also to optimize the value to the city as its shareholder by providing a dividend that ultimately the city can decide to flow through in appropriate areas to its taxpayers. In terms of reduced liability and risk for the city, that can occur in two ways under an MCC, both in terms of the actual financial and legal separation as well as the increased oversight. With respect to the financial and legal separation, it was alluded to earlier, but ultimately with the MCC doing things in its own name, in its own legal entity, that would limit the city's exposure to any contracts, any property, any other sorts of legalities or regulatory proceedings that the MCC would be entering into. It would also limit direct exposure, as Director Barda was speaking to, with respect to MCC's future debt, and it would help buffer the city from the commodity price swings that we all have recently experienced, where we saw record high prices deliver over $100 million in dividend, and now significantly lower expectations going forward. Sorry, I'll speak to the increased oversight that also drives spend decision making. So recognizing that there is $500 million of capital forecast before energy transition in the next 10 years, having a skill-based board to provide oversight and help choose the right projects and make sure that we are spending in the right areas for the right reasons and doing that with discipline, as well as confidence for which projects to pursue, and minimizing risk of cost and schedule overruns all adds value. Fit for purpose financial treatment. Certainly you heard about the difference between applying public accounting standards versus the international financial reporting standards that would be applied under an MCC model. That happens to align with private industry, which would allow for greater transparency and benchmarking with respect to financial performance of the energy business under an MCC. It would increase accountability of the MCC to demonstrate value, with the board reporting back into council on a performance basis. And the skill-based approach with the focused governance would also drive more appropriate control-based and focused decision-making. With an MCC, it would also provide access to additional funding tools if so chosen. We noted on multiple occasions that there is a financial outlook that is vulnerable today with or without the MCC, but a skill-based board can help navigate some of those uncertainties and complexities while leveraging new sources of funding. One example is that partnerships are more conducive under an MCC model compared to a municipal entity. But certainly being able to focus on energy projects without, for instance, having to compete during a municipal capital process to determine which capital projects to proceed is another example where energy projects are competing with each other in order to proceed versus with something entirely different that the municipality would cover. And ultimately, proposing that increases to funding access could enhance the long-term viability of the energy business as a whole. Further, the MCC would focus on maintaining competitive rates. We would continue the exemption that we do enjoy under an MCC model. There is initially expected to be a rate increase to the tune of 1.75% for utility rates and 0.18 cents per kilowatt hour for energy. However, we do believe that that is short-term pain for the opportunity for long-term gain through application of a skill-based board to support prudent decision-making, increased oversight, and more competitive outcomes to mitigate those cost increases and ultimately drive greater competitive outcomes longer term. And on the energy side, with respect to exports, there's a natural incentive to be as competitive as possible and overcome the carbon barrier that we are starting to see. And otherwise, on the local side of sales, we would look to the Rate Review Committee as the regulated authority to leverage skill-based committee members there with a more rigorous process to ensure appropriate and fair regulated rates. Ultimately, the increase of 1.5% in margin would be required to offset the expected costs for transitioning to an MCC. And we do believe this is possible because of the increased financial accountability, greater access to capital, the ability to prioritize capital and growth opportunities on behalf of the energy business, independent of city needs, and ultimately to position the MCC to drive growth, efficiencies, and overall value on behalf of the community. This is just an example of why we believe that opportunity is there. Back in, I believe it was 1999, the province of Ontario actually directed municipally owned distribution companies to be carved off into a separate legal entity, much like a municipally controlled corporation. And they have, the Ivy Business School has completed some analysis based on the creation of the local distribution companies, the equivalent of what we're talking about in an MCC here. And ultimately, they looked at the decision of, or the choice of makeup of those boards as to what the percentage of political involvement as directors or non-political involvement as directors. And in this case, it is suggesting that the greater the level of political decision-making on a board, the lower the outcome with respect to a dividend. Now, this doesn't say causation. It certainly didn't get into that, nor is it defining what does it look like in a municipal model before versus an MCC model after. But it is highlighting that there is a statistically significant difference between politically motivated directors versus typically energy business focused directors. So the recommendation is to proceed to a public hearing to further inform a future decision of whether to trigger an MCC or not, which we would include a rate review committee as well within that. So the proposal is that Council directs administration to proceed to arrange, in accordance with legislative requirements, a public hearing regarding the potential incorporation of a municipally controlled corporation with the city as a sole shareholder that would operate the city's electric generation, electric distribution, and gas distribution business units together with the supporting energy marketing and business analysis function, and that the public hearing would be held at council scheduled for June 24th at City Hall in council chambers. So if council decides to move forward with a public hearing, like I said earlier, that's a decision, but not the final decision if this proceeds. That would get us to the blue box, the consult with public through a public hearing, and make a decision from there as to whether or not council is interested in proceeding with implementing a municipally controlled corporation. And if post-hearing council decides to pull the trigger on an MCC to get staff to start that process towards incorporating an MCC, it would take roughly a year before an MCC would be operational. As well, as part of a public hearing, if council decides to proceed, there would be an opportunity for the public to petition over a period of 60 days, and with a public hearing tentatively proposed for June 24th, the petition would be open until August 23rd. So if council agrees to move forward with staff's recommendation for a public hearing, staff would plan to further escalate our communication efforts, which we have drafted a plan that we would plan to execute. The focus would be sharing facts to ensure understanding before a public hearing commences, and also to continue efforts for any subsequent phases. We would further develop the implementation plan and key governing documents, and particularly you'll note that some of the information was indicative and or placeholder, financial, and dividend. For instance, we would have some additional work in those areas, and ultimately we would plan to, if council gets through the next two stage gates with yeses, then we would prepare to implement the execution plan after appropriate public hearing. So the question for council tonight is if you are willing to proceed to a public hearing that we would propose to occur on June 24th later this year. Thank you.
Thank you, Managing Director Pancoast and your team. Very informative presentation. Very candid about the risks and the benefits, and very much appreciated. I think let's put a motion on the floor, get a seconder, and then we'll have discussion after that.
I'd be happy to do that. I move that council directs administration to proceed to arrange, in accordance with legislated requirements, a public hearing regarding the potential incorporation of a municipally controlled corporation, MCC, with the city as sole shareholder that would operate the city's electric generation, electric distribution, and gas distribution business units and the supporting energy marketing and business analysis function. The public hearing will be held at a council meeting scheduled for June 24th, 2025 at 4 p.m. at City Hall in council chambers.
I'll second that.
Okay. We got a seconder. Any discussion, comments, questions? Doesn't look like it. Just for the, I guess the folks in the, we got some now. We've heard this presentation, this excellent presentation now a couple of times. Just keeps getting better and more informative. So thank you for that. But we do have some questions on the board now. So Councillor Sharps, you're up first.
Thank you very much. Throughout the slide, Managing Director, we made a comment of accountable to the city, the MCC. So does that mean all accountability would be off council? Like, so I'm reading that and it says, so right now, the way it's set up, you come to council if there's a decision to be made. Would that just bypass council and go straight to the city operations?
Correct. Councillor Sharps, through the chair, ultimately the day-to-day decision-making would be resting with the officers and the board for the MCC. However, that would be governed by the unanimous shareholder agreement and related governing documents. So that would provide guardrails if there is a particular material item that would need to be revisited with council at that time.
Okay, so by city, when we say accountable to city, we mean council. Okay, just making sure I understood that. On the RRC, there was a recommendation for a non-voting community member. Why would that be non-voting?
To Councillor Sharps through the chair, ultimately we're proposing an opportunity to have a community member perhaps observe and learn and even provide input, but not be a voting member, specifically because we're wanting to make sure that the weight of decision-making on a majority basis is led by skill-based representatives.
Okay. I only had one more question and then a comment. On the rate increase, I think it was a couple of slides back, it was I can't remember, 1.79%, was that the percentage?
I think it was...
1.25 maybe? I erased it after I wrote it down, I don't know why. It doesn't actually matter. My question is, why? 1.75. Oh, there you go. Okay, so can you explain that a little bit more? So if there's already money allocated for an MCC and everything else, why is there a rate increase?
Certainly through the chair, a rate increase, there's two elements, the rate increase and the commodity increase, and that's essentially reflective of the ongoing incremental costs related to having payment for skill-based board members, skill-based rate review committee members, addition of a separate CFO to make sure that there's financial integrity separate from the municipal side of the city. So there is that incremental ongoing costs that were alluded to on an earlier slide, and that is split between on an appropriate basis towards which would be allocated to the utility or regulated side of the business and which would be allocated to the commodity side of the business. So with those incremental costs, that's what you're seeing on an ongoing basis there. However, we do believe that would be short-term in nature. The challenge is it's easy to articulate the cost side. It's much more difficult to articulate the value side of the equation. We do anticipate, though, that the added skill based value of the MCC board would look to overcome this longer term.
Okay, so I just had one more, question/comment. You might be able to add some value to this. So I guess a little bit of my concern as I'm looking at this, if we do an open public hearing in June and we get the results from that, we'll obviously know it as we speak, but we're literally 5 months from an election. So my fear is, let's just say we do the public hearing and everybody wants to go for it, and so we do it, next council comes in and says, stop. What have we spent doing that? And is there less risk just letting this happen after the election and letting the new council do it? Or what happens? I guess I just don't know what the risk is or the cost. I feel like if we move forward right now, we're making a decision for the next council and they could easily overturn it. And there's a lot of wasted man hours and work if we do that.
Thank you through the chair. I'll start an answer and then I'll perhaps look to Mr. Clausen to weigh in on the process for any future council to reverse the decision. And I'll simply reflect back because it will be council's decision as to whether that delay is worth it or not. But I have heard from this table that there's certainly value in this council understanding and going through the rigorous process that we've been to date, including a number of closed session opportunities to understand and ask questions about some of those commercially sensitive items that a future council won't yet be privy to, nor is the public. As you probably have experienced, there is a learning curve for the energy business. It is complex. We aren't always able to portray how complex it is with brand new members. If there are new members at this table, there could be a period of time for learning curve, plus the missed opportunity of being at the table with the KPMG experts in a closed setting to ask some of those tough questions. So I think there's the question of if there is a delay for a future council, are they best equipped to make that decision? If there is a large change in this council, I suspect there will be a significant learning process and we'll be once again revisiting this. And actually, if I may be frank, that is part of the challenge of running an energy business, If we have to educate the decision makers each time it changes every 4 years, that slows down the energy business. It's suboptimal, and we aren't able to drive the efficient speed to decision type of value that we'd like to create.
Thank you. What about the second half of that question?
Sorry, the second
That's
half
okay.
with respect to a potential process unwind, thank you for the reminder through the chair. I'll invite Mr. Clausen to walk through that for us, please.
Thank you. Through the chair to Councillor Sharps. Yes, if the corporation has been formally incorporated by that point, a new council could invoke the voluntary dissolution process under the Business Corporations Act. Dissolution would constitute a material change, and so before anything else, there would have to be public engagement in accordance with the Municipal Government Act and the Municipally Controlled Corporation Regulation, and there'd be an opportunity for the public to make representations, and then feedback would have to be gathered and provided to the corporation. It would ultimately be a city decision as the shareholder, and so that would involve a shareholder meeting and resolution, filings with the registrar, and notices to creditors, if any, at that point. It would, just to emphasize, it would ultimately be a decision of the city, and the earlier the dissolution were to occur after incorporation, the simpler and it would be to effect, and a shorter time period it would take as well.
Thank you. Just a quick clarification. I want to make sure I'm understanding the verbiage. When you say city, are you using that interchangeably with council or no?
Right. It would be a council. Yes, a council decision. Yes. So interchangeably in that. Yeah.
Thank you. Just want to make sure I'm clear. Thank you.
Councillor Knodel.
Thanks, Councillor McGrogan. So I'm always one to see both sides in my brain. So right now I'm holding the idea of having council control and potentially lower cost, but less sustainability on one side, and then having expert leadership and potentially incrementally higher cost. You say potentially short term, but more sustainability and possibly more benefits, but we can't determine what those are right now. So when we first started talking about this, the image in my mind, being around young people all day in a school environment who are quite environmentally sensitive, I always think about what am I as a council member handing to the next generation? Pardon me, I talk with my hands. And I want to make a decision that I feel is the most responsible, but also most economical at the same time. And I think that ultimately there's probably going to be an opportunity costs, as I mentioned in the last discussion. I appreciate that this MCC model offers a nimble response. That is something that we, as we just talked about, don't always have at our fingertips because of the way that bureaucracy works. The ability to respond quickly to the energy landscape and make decisions that may benefit the community faster, I think that's really, really important. Less politically influenced, in my perspective, is a good thing. I do hear, as I say that, again, holding another perspective at the same time, Councillor Van Dyke is very community and very, I'm going to say, like, the word in my head is union, but that is not, that represents what she cares about. But I think that political and business we can find a middle ground. So I'm hoping that that's what the contract or the guidelines that we come up with help create security for the people, but also nimbleness in the business side. So it's like, how do we walk that line? What I've heard from the community so far is like, how is this going to affect my job in the industry? Like if these people are working in, say, power engineering or engineering, is this model going to affect their role? So when I'm done reading this, I'm just going to ask you to respond to that. And it's kind of already been answered, but you could answer it again. I'm looking forward to the community response. I expect to hear hesitation. I think that is going to be, being that this has been the model we've lived with for so long, and people, especially those who have lived through reaping the benefits of this model at a different time, I think are going to be nervous about change. But I appreciate the education provided tonight, and I appreciate the speed at which we're going, that it's not, I don't feel like it's too fast or too slow. It's kind of a slow, methodical, step-by-step process, and of course following the guidelines of the MGA. So my one question is, and I think even Councillor Sharp asked a similar question, how does the union and the employees underneath the MCC, how does that look for them? Does the union change? Do they become, I'll just leave it at that. I think I've said enough.
Thank you for the question, Councillor Knodel, through the chair. Ultimately, we have been taking opportunity to check in with staff in advance of sessions where we come to council, and that is their key question. What happens to our collective agreement? What happens to my benefits and pension, etc.? We have been working closely with People Services. We also have been offering heads-up opportunities with the unions themselves. And we can confirm that MCCs are required essentially to take on the existing agreements. So that would continue for our union staff. And similarly, we would look to simply shift the current employment conditions and terms and conditions over for those staff that would be shifting over to an MCC. We have confirmed that an MCC is eligible to enroll under LAP, our pension provider, so that is also confirmed. And then generally, we have a little bit of work to do on the benefit side, but we believe there's a way to work on a group basis with the city to maintain the opportunities that exist there as well.
I'll follow up if you don't mind, really quick. Thank you, through the chair. If you had to offer any sort of advice through your experience in the industry, I think you gave the line graph about those in, was it Ontario? Correct. Those in Ontario that had moved from not municipally controlled, but the municipality having authority to a expert board controlled organization. You can correct me if my language is wrong. Is there any other perspectives, models, ideas that you think might educate or inform the public's opinion as they navigate making a decision, or even like contemplating, how can I wrap my head around this? How could this possibly be good? Because I think change is hard. I said that before when we were talking about the transportation master plan. Change is hard. It's an unknown. But how do we entertain it as a possibility without just getting afraid and going, no way, I don't want that?
It's a great question. Through the chair to Councillor Knodel, I suspect my simple answer would be that it's a proven model. We can look to a number of municipally controlled corporations across the province and beyond, and typically it's a rare world where any of those are returned from being a municipally controlled corporation back into the municipality. So as a proven model, they have seen success. They have are an ongoing concern and provide that value back into the communities that they serve through dividends, because MCCs exist to be profit centers, and that's where it's highly different than a typical municipality and the typical services that municipalities provide. But I will highlight, so people often think of the NMAXs and the EPCORs. They're in similar types of businesses. Where the city of Medicine Hat is unique is that we have an exemption within our franchise areas, those graphs, location graphs that were shown on the screen earlier. We would look to retain that authority within our exemption area. That would be considered a material change if we were to look beyond that area. So the NMAXs, the EPCORs, they have all grown beyond what their original objective was. That wouldn't be the intent, at least not at this stage, for our possible MCC. Instead, we would focus on driving efficiencies and value add strictly for the benefit of the city of Medicine Hat.
Final comment, if you're okay with it, Councillor McGrogan? That's fine. Okay, final comment. When people hear profit center, my take is that they're afraid that means profit only for the business, not for the people. But just to give peace of mind to the community, and hopefully you can support this, the dividend still goes back to the community. So the more money the Comco or the MCC would make, ultimately that does benefit the municipality still. Is that correct?
Yes, thank you for the question through the chair to Councillor Knodel. I'll highlight a couple things there. Profit center, yes, but ultimately the city is investing in the assets and is expecting some sort of return back to the community. That would come in the form of a dividend, yes. So the higher the dividend, the greater the benefit directly to the city of Medicine Hat, for which they can then decide, are we offsetting property tax increases? Are we providing cost pressure relief? Are we creating an amenity, building an amenity? That would be up to the city to decide how to use those funds. However, those profits aren't on the backs of our community necessarily. There would still be opportunity for sales outside of the city through exports by electric generation into the provincial grid. So we would look to maximize profits and sales there. Inside the city, the rates would be regulated and reviewed by the skill-based board, who also understands the business and the risks and would have plenty of opportunity for public engagement, akin to what we see at the AUC level as a regulator. So the rate review committee would provide rate protections for the regulated rates, and any other rates that the MCC would be willing to provide locally beyond the regulated portion would have to be a worthy alternative to the regulated rate, so there's no sense offering them. So inside our franchise area, there would be protections addressed by the rate review committee, and outside the export sales would be profit maximizing, but we would also have to be competitive in the market to achieve those sales, and that's where a skill-based board could help drive cost control, value add, to make sure we're as competitive as possible to be able to sell as much as we can into the market.
Thank you, Shelley. I really appreciate it.
Councillor Dumanowski.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for the presentation. As been, I guess, spoken to tonight, we have a very important decision, or at least next step in the decision before us. I appreciate the technicality and yet simple language that went into the presentation. It's long, but it's very intentional, so the public at large can understand succinctly, but nonetheless understand the depth and gravity of the decision before us as the representatives of the people. So a number of questions. I did ask a couple of these when we had our closed session, but I think they're relevant to this. Because if I'm on the outside thinking about this, I might ask these questions. So one is about, and we heard, a skill-based board versus the current model, which is essentially council, which in whole changes every 4 years, or partial, or whatever majority. And as you indicated, having to bring them up to speed, having to essentially respond not as quickly and with the amount of flexibility as you would sometimes like or enjoy in order to capitalize on the very ever-changing environment of the energy commodity business. I can certainly appreciate, as a former chairperson of energy, I know Councillor Trimble in the audience chaired it, and we got Councillor Van Dyke, many people and councils who are always trying to grapple with the complexity of this business. Never mind the ebb and flow of factors that are in our environment today that we never even saw a few handful of years ago. So my question is around skill-based board versus current council, supplemented by the best consultants you can find. No need to create a board, no upstart cost. I think I know the answer, but help the public understand the answer to that question.
Thank you, Councillor Dumanowski. Through the chair, it's a good question because it's one that I had perhaps considered along the way as well. But ultimately, in that model where you are relying on council as the ultimate decision maker, supported by expert advisors, that is a model that could be considered for sure. But in that case, you have many of the same costs, but you don't have all of the same benefits. You still have the length of time to get to council, and now you're actually introducing additional steps of delay by having to first go to the advisors. You're still needing to have a level of education for council. Otherwise, council is relying heavily on the advisors. There would be a challenge, I suspect, even attracting the advisors if they don't have an opportunity to mold and drive outcomes that they're interested in, if they're just advising and handing the answer over to someone else to make the decision. Ultimately, there is still the political impact, which has its pros and cons, but as a decision maker, council certainly does listen to the public, appropriately so. But that may overshadow some of the technical realities that often get lost at the table when push comes to shove around key decisions. So I think that could certainly be a model, but it fails to address the key nimbleness, key elements of making sure that there is fit-for-purpose decision-making as needed at the energy business level.
So that ties into another question I have around, and we saw and heard that the city would be the sole shareholder and the sole owner of the MCC. So the public has concerns, they have questions, they're frustrated, they're downright upset. Where or who are the public ratepayers, one and the same, complaining to? Are they complaining to the council who is elected to create an MCC? Is the MCC the body they go to? Who do they go to? If we're trying to remove the complexity or the political challenges of trying to be both persons, the responsible to the public and stewards of a responsible utility, but at the same time there are real situations occurring, notwithstanding the one that happened a couple of years ago where council responded with some funds to offset significant fluctuations in the commodity world. Who would they be going to at that point?
Thank you, through the chair. That's a great question. Ultimately, the decision-making for the energy business would shift to the board of the MCC. The decision-making for rates would shift to the rate regulator. So if it was a question of rates, much like people do today, they could check in with Director Tuksher's team, for instance, who is first line to determine what we would put forward as an MCC to the rate review committee, but ultimately the rate review process would be the best opportunity to appropriately weigh in and provide thoughts about rates. If it's anything beyond rates, ultimately they could check in with the board, but the board wouldn't necessarily have an obligation to respond if it's within the guardrails set out by council under the unanimous shareholder agreement and other governing documents. If it's material enough that it did impact the unanimous shareholder agreement that the MCC needed to come back to council, that's when a public hearing would actually need to be introduced regardless. But in theory, council would be limited to performance review of the MCC and otherwise, from a public perspective, opportunities to leverage the dividend proceeds and reallocate them as appropriate.
Mr. Chairman, next question. Thank you for that. With an MCC, we will have a reduced rate of return on our investments because we will be transferring significant fund, 79 million or so, over to them. The debt remains on the city side. We have a 1.7% increase in our commodity charge. Specific to the debt limit and debt service limits, I know, I understand on the chart as well, I don't know what slide that is, 48, I guess it is. It says requires additional investigation. What do we know at this point around, because typically we enjoy a debt ceiling of 2 times revenue if the dividend policy shifts significant amounts of the funds or revenues from, if not all, from the utility side to the MCC, but we still have the debt servicing. We have a promissory note of funding coming over, but we're kind of holding, help me understand for the public why that makes sense. I know it does, but it's your job to help make sense out of it, please.
Yeah, thank you through the chair to Councillor Dumanowski. So we would still recognize 2 times the revenue. Our revenue amount would not be as high as it is currently because we wouldn't show the entire revenue from the MCC. It would only be the net income portion, so that amount will be less. However, when we do apply the promissory note against the pre-existing debt, it pretty much zeroes out that amount of debt that is used in the debt limit calculation. And so by doing that, it will lower our debt limit. Does that help with that?
I believe it does. I'll move on. Last question, I promise it's quick. It is the rate review committee versus the initiation of that rate review committee versus the MCC, which if council makes a decision tonight, and then I think it was August, and we have that 1 year kind of intervening planning execution year, should they be tethered on the same timeline? Help me understand why there might, I'm struggling, I genuinely don't know the answer. Why would we not tether them? Because in some ways, the rate review committee could inadvertently challenge the initiation or the first stages of an MCC, depending on what direction they take. Can you help me understand that better? And that's all the questions I have.
Thank you for that question. That is something I should clarify through the chair. We are actually assuming that they go hand in hand because there is extra cost and rigor and expense to engage a rate review committee, but we see that as an important check and balance against an MCC to make sure that the MCC has skill-based review of its proposed rates. We are proposing that they be hand in hand and would be executed through the same implementation period for the same go-live timeline. However, the reason why the focus for the public hearing is the MCC itself is because it's the municipally controlled corporation that under the MGA requires a public hearing. The rate review committee does not. We are, however, thinking of them as the same timeline tethered together.
Councillor Van Dyke.
Yes, thank you through the chair. I'm going to keep it brief because of the time, and I've asked questions at a lot of previous meetings around this, but I just wondered if you could speak a little bit about the unanimous shareholder agreement. I know that a lot of the concerns I've raised have been related to meeting the needs of the community and customer service and the values of the city, and how do we make sure that we're continuing to meet those in an organization that is, its existence is made, is to make a profit versus the common good?
Thank you for that question, and I may turn over a piece of that to Mr. Clausen to talk about specifics within the unanimous shareholder and other governing documents. However, I will share that, as I mentioned earlier, because the MCC in this case would be dedicated to providing value to its sole owner, the City of Medicine Hat, and its franchise area would be local, those values would continue to resonate, even if the board is a skill-based board. If there, for instance, today I could certainly see naturally we would assume a common emergency response where we would look to do something together. That's just good practice to make sure that parties come together appropriately for emergency response. Another one would be economic development. It is in both the city's interests and the potential MCC's interest to make sure that we are looking for growth opportunities and attracting and retaining investment to the extent possible. Beyond that, certainly if there is something quite strong that there could be an opportunity to weigh that into a unanimous shareholder agreement, recognizing the more specific constraints imposed on the MCC, the less independent and free to carry on energy business activities. So that has to be a thoughtful approach. But I don't see any reason why we wouldn't have ongoing values continue. I obviously can't guarantee that because we don't know who the potential board would be at this point, but certainly the governing documents would assist. And regarding the governing documents, Mr. Claassen, if you could supplement, please.
Certainly, thank you. Through the chair to Councillor Van Dyke. So the directors and officers have to act with a view to the best interests of the corporation, and they have to make decisions based on their professional discretion and judgment. But through the governance documents, for example, the unanimous shareholder agreement, we can direct them to consider certain things when they're deciding what's in the best interest of the corporation. For example, we can set out that they must consider, that the city is the shareholder is a public entity and wants to see a certain level of service attained. We also, that is actually a mandatory component of the unanimous shareholder agreement. We have to discuss the service delivery standards. And so there'd be opportunity there to for council to shape what kind of stamp, like customer service and that sort of thing, that it would like the corporation to follow. So as Managing Director Pankos noted, it would ultimately be a director and officer decision, but they would take guidance from the governance documents. And at the end of the day, if council were dissatisfied with the performance of the board, council could replace the board as the shareholder.
Councillor Hyder.
Thank you, Councillor McGowan, and through the chair. I just wanted to give some accolades to the staff and the work that's been done here, Rochelle and your team, Travis and Lola. This has been an educational journey for all of us. And I so appreciate when we meet and we talk about MCC like tonight. It was very thorough, explanatory. Everybody pitched in, did their job, had their strengths. And like you said, Managing Director Pankos, it's a learning curve. And I feel grateful, whether I see this through or the next council does, to be part of this conversation, because it is something that we have to decide on. So I appreciate all the work that's gone into this, and thank you for this.
Councillor Robbins.
Thank you, and through the chair, I'm really struggling with this. And I know it's not the end gate or stage gate, as you've called it many times. I know it's not the end, but it's sort of, it's a very difficult decision. It put me in mind of a moment I had when I was a very junior crown, and a judge asked me a question and I stood up to answer it because I felt I knew what the answer was. And he looked at me, he said, "Careful, Ms. Robbins, those are real bullets." And I said, "Can I have 15 minutes? And I went off to really think about what I was saying, to research it, to make sure I understood it, to make sure I was right about the law, or at least right in my position in the law. So I've never forgotten that phrase that he gave me, which is sort of what's come back to me in this moment. Because I'm looking at all the history of Medicine Hat and the success of the energy business because of excellent city staff. Manager Tuchshore is sitting back there. I can barely see him, but my goodness, he really knows his stuff, and it's impressive to see and hear his knowledge and understanding of the entire business. And so it's just been such a journey to get to this point. The other thing I will say is sometimes I will try to use my powers of persuasion to convince other council members to come along with me on one of my thoughts. I really don't want them to do that. Not that they were going to, but I'm rambling a bit, but I just don't. They all have I tried to go last. Sorry, Councillor McGrogan is gonna have to chime in after me so that they had their own thoughts and opinions before I chimed in and tried to persuade them. I'm not trying to persuade them in any way, and I respect all of their thoughts so much, and there's just so many ways to go here. I don't feel like the timing is right for me to say yes to this, although your explanation of why the timing is right is an excellent explanation. And you knew those were real bullets when you answered the question, and so I really appreciate that, Managing Director Pancoast. I don't personally feel like the timing is right for a lot of reasons, which I won't belabor extensively at this point. Most of my thoughts are around the work that KPMG did and their repeated statements throughout the report in our conversations is that the fabric of the world is changing as we speak. And so what we believe in one moment in time may not be what we believe in the next moment of time. What we think is in the best interest of the city in this moment of time might not be. And maybe it never gets to a stability where it makes the path clear. But I'm at the point where I just don't think the path is clear. And if I don't know which direction to go, then I should stand until I figure it out. So I'm going to vote no on this, but not because of the work that wasn't excellent. And if my colleagues vote yes, and we end up in a public hearing, I will listen to what the public has to say, and I'll make a decision about that independently of this thought. I just think the timing is wrong, but if my colleagues don't think the timing is wrong, then I'll really look forward to that public hearing. If that's the decision of the rest of council, I certainly would respect it greatly. But for me, I'm going to stand where I am and keep my bullets to myself.
Okay, I'm going to come out shooting. So to me, the decision is quite, Councillor Dumanowski, did you have more to say? Go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, I have comments. I asked questions earlier. I thought we were going to wait for comments at the end, so I do have some comments at the appropriate time.
Okay, the motion's on the table, so go ahead.
I apologize. You were just ready to go. But anyway, I'll attempt to be brief. So I said earlier, we're at a very different energy environment than we've ever seen before. We keep hearing the necessity to be nimble, the necessity to decouple the politics of running a utility, but yet maintain sole ownership and shareholder responsibility for an MCC is ever before us, more than it's ever been certainly before. We have a very complicated landscape, ever-changing, even in the last few weeks. Do we have a carbon cap or don't we? What does that do for us? I appreciate the challenges staff have with that kind of a complex environment, and so I understand the need for a laser-focused and more surgical governance response model. So for me, I have to weigh, like Councillor Robbins said, not the burden, but the challenges before us. I fear, like many issues, because I can say this because I've been here, of us delaying this. You didn't say that, Councillor Robbins, but I fear the temperature, or reading the temperature, that there's, we're not sure, or it's so close to an election. It's unfortunate because it has a perception to look like we're trying to hurry something through, but that could be further from the case or from the reality. We're trying to do what's right and respond accordingly. So for me, an MCC allows us to operate more like a business, but it's still city-owned. And that is going to be the election question, whoever runs. Do you support public utility, yes or no? The answer is yes. The MCC is a publicly owned utility run through a different governance model. There's nobody, or generally I'll say, in the public who have a notional understanding or a deeper understanding of how NMAX and EPCOR run their MCCs that would argue over its kind of self-determination and its benefit to their communities. And I think over time, with some confidence and support for this, we will get there as well. Again, it means keeping our ownership and control right here at Medicine Hat. Is the flexibility to run our energy services will be more efficient, more responsive, and align with our values. So this isn't about ownership, it's about direction and vision. And for me, an MCC gives us the power, literally, to shape our future and protect what we've built and grow into what comes next. So for me, it's the smart thing to do, and it's the responsible thing to do. I am in support of the motion.
Councillor Van Dyke.
My apologies to the chair. I just wanted to make one follow-up comment, just a little bit to reassure the public that the motion tonight on the floor is not the decision to go ahead with an MCC. So this is, the motion is to have a public hearing. And so I just want to make sure that there's good understanding of that we have not made a decision. This is not the decision point. One of the reasons why I am in support of this is because generally I have a good sense of the public's views on things, but in this area, the people that I thought would have been in support of it have not been, and the people who I would have assumed would not be in support are. And so I really want to hear from the public, and I hope that after we hear from the public, then we have a little pause of time to allow the kind of the permeation into the community of what's been heard and some reflection time for council. That's the time when I want to make sure we're not rushing, but I do want to hear from the public about their views on this. So I'm in support. Thank you.
My bullets are dry again. So I appreciate your comments, everybody's comments, but the question was really quite simple. Should we, well, we're legally obligated to hear from the public, but I want to hear from the public. So to me, the question is really just why not? So I support the motion. So seeing no other speakers, we will vote on the motion. And that is passed 5-2. Thank you. So we'll move on then to notices of motion. It says there's none here. Does anybody have a surprise notice of motion? Councillor Robbins?
Yeah, I just wanted to check with maybe Managing Director Pankos or City Manager. The public hearing that Council has just approved is at 4 p.m. Is that right? On a Tuesday?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, being there's no notice of motion, councillor member reports. I got that right? Sorry. Seeing none, I guess our meeting is adjourned. So we're adjourned at, sorry, am I missing something? Okay, it is 10 o'clock. Meeting adjourned.